curdle. Because there are some enzymes in ginger that could curdle the milk. So you have
Yes.
to kind of be very careful
Yes.
about it also. So
Unless you use milk powder.
वो नहीं करूंगा मैं, मिल्क पाउडर नहीं कर सकता मैं, चाहे मिल्क चाहिए प्रॉपर।
या लैक्टोज फ्री मिल्क, दोनों ऑप्शन है।
लैक्टोज फ्री मिल्क,
लैक्टोज में कोई फ्लेवर नहीं है और कर्डलिंग होती है लैक्टोज की। अब मैं साइंटिस्ट नहीं हूँ वत्सल हमारे कॉल पे, मतलब
लैक्टोज फ्री मिल्क असल नहीं, गुड क्वेश्चन। क्या थिक होएगा क्या चाय का? चाय थिकनेस आएगी क्या? नहीं आएगी
नहीं,
ना।
कुछ भी नहीं होगा ना।
कर्डलिंग का लैक्टोज से देयर इज नो रिलेशन.
अच्छा,
Isn't it the sugar that no wait, it's the protein, right?
It's the fats, proteins का मतलब, because when you curdle it to make
Sorry.
cheese, it's the fats and the proteins that curdle together, right?
I thought it had something to do with the lactic acid thing, the sugar turning into acids, but my bad.
Maybe, I don't know, but
This is a nice experiment, Raj. Like we, lactose free milk के साथ क्या?
प्रॉब्लम नहीं, मतलब मेरा assumption है कि it will not, the chai will not be as thick.
Long years ago, we made a trip with destiny.
Where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high, and knowledge is free. The words come out from the depth of truth.
आसमान पे तुम इतने तारों को देखते हो, लखों खा तारे, इन तारों की कहानियां हैं, इन तारों के नाम हैं। एक दफे तुम पहचान लो वो तारे का नाम ये है, तो दोस्त हो जाता है तुम्हारा।
मतलब घर में दादागिरी मत करना, तो हमारी डायरेक्ट पहचान है। मैथमेटिक, अरे तू समझता क्या? आजा मेरे साथ मुकाबला कर।
हमें तो अब एक कोशिश करनी है कि अपना देश ऐसा बनाए और दुनिया ऐसा बनाए जिसमें लड़ाई झगड़ा न हो, कम से कम हो, लोग मिल के रहें, काम करें, अपना भी फायदा हो, देश का भी हो। तो लड़ाई झगड़ा करने से कोई होता नहीं।
बैट्समैन प्रेशर की परवाह नहीं करता, उसका पूरा ध्यान उस बॉल पे होता है।
पंजाब की खुशबू।
Basically, what I have been thinking about right now, especially PhD, जो kid, I mean students, kids जो भी बोला जाओ, जो PhD वगैरह या पोस्ट डॉक, in India we have a very specific type of education that is kind of given to us, right? It's very regimented. It's, to give you guys one example, compared to say the US, for example, in like primary middle school, you guys, the US kid has to do like a book report where they read Huckleberry Finn or whatever, and they do a book report. In India, at least where I went to school, and a lot of people I know, even English or Hindi maybe, you did the chapter and the chapter had some questions and teacher would tell you the answers and you'd write them down and then you mug them up, and like there's no chance for you to kind of think about it yourself and like any sort of creativity. Largely are taught to think in binaries, answer problems, hence proved. So I was thinking, as you guys kind of go through the PhD process where the whole idea is to finding something new essentially, right, within a very niche space, do you guys feel that compared to other kids from places where, to say, creativity and innovation is slightly more encouraged, do you guys find it slightly tougher to think out of the box? Or
Vatsal, do you want to go first?
Sure. See, the process of this finding the knowledge gap and constructing your PhD question and trying to innovate or research, it's very personal in every PhD program. So it's not a fixed मतलब right कि innovation ऐसे करना है या question ऐसे पूछना है. So it's a very personal journey that everyone takes when they start a PhD. And for me, it wasn't really that big of a challenge as compared to other people, because to be honest, मतलब how you proceed in a PhD program also depends a lot on how you are supervised and how you are mentored by your supervisors or your other academic advisors and stuff. So yes, I will say that there was a part of what you said was true, meaning that because we come from a different educational system, there were certain things that would come to us a little later than compared to others. For example, people who came from Canadian or a US academic system. For example, I was very lazy in terms of reading academic articles. I would not make it my priority because I was so deprived of, practical, experimental stuff बिकॉज इंडिया में आपको वो करने को नहीं मिलता, राइट? सो आई वाज लाइक नहीं नहीं, अभी मिल गए, अभी यही करेंगे, राइट? सो आई वाज लाइक लेट्स डू दिस एक्सपेरिमेंट, लेट्स डू दैट एक्सपेरिमेंट. बट देन अदर्स वर नॉट डूइंग दैट. दे वर लाइक let me just build my base by reading everything, understanding the whole essence of why we want to do it, why we want to do a certain experiment. And I would not do that basic, I would not do that background. I would just dive right into it. And that took me a lot of, at least my entire masters, to understand and learn that, rather than doing 500 different experiments, you should maybe read 500 articles, papers, to construct that one experiment or two experiments that you should do. So that was definitely a learning for me.
And I know Meg, you will get into this, but वही इसी में ये ना कि the way I see PhD and in itself is like, and something that I find fascinating is ultimately every like up until like grad school, you're basically in a way learning something, learning tech, learning processes, whatever, right? But learning the answers to questions that have already been asked. PhD is the first step where you're actually thinking about a question that you will form and then you'll answer it. So that whole process, I feel, is especially kind of, I don't know, prone to some of these foundational biases that are creep into our process, I guess. That's why.
So I think here the education system in question becomes important. For if the education system is good, if you're, for example, in an American system, you are conducting research while you're in school. It may not be groundbreaking research, you might be replicating things, but आप स्कूल में ही आपको सिखाया जा रहा है कि एक्सपेरिमेंट कैसे सेटअप करते हैं, तो हाइपोथेसिस कैसे लिखते हैं, टेस्टिंग कैसे होती है. तो you start that at school level, and then you get the chance to be an RA, or you get the chance to actually be a researcher in a real lab if you end up going to college in the US, right? So they are getting their head start like about, I would say, at least 4 years ahead in the track as opposed to people from other places. The downside, of course, is that US they don't have enough people who go to college.
Of course, yeah.
Hence the current H1B drama that's going on. And so when we end up coming to this system, they give us a primer on everything. So we get a lot of support catching up. तो यहाँ पे आने का वो एक है कि एटलीस्ट इंडिया में भी मास्टर्स ड्यूरिंग माय टाइम इन द मास्टर्स प्रोग्राम वी वर एक्सपेक्टेड टू नो अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स, बट यहाँ पे people you come in and they're like, okay, we'll assume that even if no matter where you studied before this, we're going to assume that everything is new to you and we're going to train you from scratch. And to answer your question, again, experience ka mostly because my parents pushed me a lot towards like reading critically. A lot of my books, even if I was not actually writing a book report, there was a certain amount of encouragement or even little bit of parental pressure to turn whatever I'm reading into some kind of a intellectual product where you write about it or you talk to your parents about it. That because of that foundation, and because I started my collegiate life with a humanities degree, reading was like, it was a big shift where you come to college and the first thing that they tell you is, now you're the expectation is that you are reading 3000 pages per week. You are going to engage with text very deeply, like you're going to read, you're going to do critical analysis, and every time you pick up your pen, you are going to be writing an essay. तो वो जो एक पहले महीने में, पहले 2 हफ्ते में, like when you come into like that humanities program, the first thing they do is they're like, leave everything behind and now you're going to start reading and writing. It all went away as now that I'm back into, I guess, some kind of a STEM field, and I mean, they're not binaries, but कभी-कभी मेरे को लगता है कि मैं जितना लिखा था वो 3 साल में humanities program में, I've never gotten back to that level of writing. But Richa, like, what about you? Is there any engagement with research?
Yes, so there was some during my master's program, and what I was struck by is that they don't give you any guidance, really. You have to, the hardest part is knowing where to start, right? So if you don't come from that background, the most difficult thing is the professor says, hey, here is the problem. I want you to set up So there was a large simulator for an automotive system. And they're just like, okay, set up the communications of this system. And I'm like, I have no idea. They're like, oh yeah, here's all the manuals and read and start. It's like 1,000 pages for the most basic kind of thing just to start communicating with that thing. That was the thing, like just figuring out how to solve problems and where to start solving problems, that was difficult. And now I know, because I have to still do the same thing. Like I work in a field where it's a new industry, so it's autonomous driving, right? So a lot of the stuff hasn't been done before, and it does involve reading papers, figuring out what else other people are doing in the industry. And it's a lot of the same thing, but now you know where to start when you look at 1,000-page manual.
Yeah.
That was the basic difference, I think. In India, your professors are always just like, these are the things you have to do, ये करना है, यहाँ से ये मेन टेक्स्ट बुक है, लेकिन ये जो दूसरी other 21 questions वाली बुक है, इसमें सारे आंसर्स हैं, ये कर लो.
I have even seen PhDs being copied, so this is nothing. Yeah. So I just wanted to add one thing to Raj's question. Like, look, what we can see is that, the kind of innovation and the kind of even patents and research that is posted from US compared to India tells you the story, right? Like and I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about 70s, 80s, जब इतना H1B और immigration था भी नहीं, उस वक्त की बात है. So the thing is कि like we may be the wrong people to answer that question, because even though going through that same system, there will be some people who will be, motivated towards asking questions because some things might look interesting and, things like that. There might be many motivations. For example, Megh said that her parents were very supportive. So were mine. Like there were things like I had one of the teachers in primary schools who was amazing, who would inspire us to answer, ask questions, and that is how she would make us learn things. So that give me that kida of trying to find out things like that. But the proportion of that would be so much lower compared to the population that goes through that system. Tells you the story basically.
And I think that's such a good segue to why we are here today. Today we are joined by all the co-hosts of what Raj likes to call Small India Radio. I know we have not incorporated, but we are a group of people who found ourselves connected with each other thanks to Raj. So in a way, the founder of all of our podcast endeavors. Right. So in case you haven't heard Raj's amazing podcast, he is one of the co-hosts of the Bharatiya Janata podcast. Vatsal, Raj, and Richa, whose voice you just heard, are the amazing co-hosts, along with other people of the PCCI podcast, which covers cricket. Yeah, they have a lot of hot takes, which continues to be delightful. And as we were talking, like one theme that does come up is there is something unique that happened that got all of us to where we are. It is, in a way, it's not the norm. There are many factors, a lot of luck which went, and of course hard work that went into getting us from where we started our journey to where we are today. And that is something that feels like a good retrospective as we walk into another year, another trash fire year. So as we start this conversation, like officially, thank you, Raj, for asking us about the PhD. I guess just to give everybody some context, where did all of you grow up? And when we talk about, like, I know that there was some level of urbanness involved in all of our city spaces, but growing up, did it feel like a small town or a big town to you? And what was exposure like?
I have a very important question before anybody starts. इसमें इंट्रो म्यूजिक पीसीसीआई का होगा, भाजपा का होगा,
सबका डाल देंगे,
देसी एकेडमिया का होगा.
मैं मिक्स करूंगी. मेरे को सारे ट्रैक्स भेजो. I'll make like an awesome mix and
dubstep remix.
अभी जो लेटेस्ट भाजपा है ना, उसका जो टाइटल ट्रैक है ना, उसका जो म्यूजिक है, उसमें क्रिसमस रॉक का बैकग्राउंड था।
So, okay.
मेरे
That's
को
funny.
तो प्रोक्रेस्टिनेशन का बहाना चाहिए। देखो तुमने दे दिया, मैं 2 घंटे में यही करूंगी बैठ के।
With that out of the way, please.
Richa,
Okay.
do you mind start taking this first?
Okay,
Yeah, of course, Richa.
I'll start. So actually, my upbringing was in a variety of different places. So I was born in northern India, Uttar Pradesh today, and I was just there for a few years, but my extended family is essentially still there. So I occasionally visit. We would go every year in Diwali. We would take those really long trains from wherever you were, or flights or whatever, but mostly trains. And the rest of my upbringing was mostly in Pune. So in 1999, we moved to Pune, and before we moved to Pune for a few years, I was in the UK because my dad had an IT job. Moving to, I think what that does to you in general, it gives you first of all a really good base in English. You know, if you do your primary school education there, and that is where my love for reading began. I was already a very avid reader before I moved to Pune, and once we did go to Pune, I think my parents decided to put me not into one of those typical convent schools in Pune, which is where you would generally go. He put me into a school which was more geared towards NRIs. So not like an NRI, like an IB school. It's still state board school, but you would have more people coming from abroad. You would also have, for some reason, there was also a Daewoo plant at that time in Pune. So we had a lot of South Koreans randomly in our school as well.
So it's like a gated community school.
Yes, very much a
K-pop.
gated community school. So this is where I would like to put the context of Pune in general. Like if you haven't been to the city, it's kind of cleaved in half by a river. And the culture is so different above the river to the north of the river and completely different to the south of the river. So the north of the river is very cosmopolitan. You got a lot of people coming from outside, and essentially because a lot of people from Pune move abroad, there's everybody knows somebody who's an NRI, and they're very much familiar with that culture. Everyone speaks in English, which is very strange for me because I expected totally to be completely out of place when I joined my school, but everyone spoke in English. And, a lot of my classmates were really also very much into reading, and it was a completely different culture when I was in school. But when I went to my engineering college, which was south of the river, it was almost like a complete cultural shock. And until then, I knew how to write in Marathi and read Marathi, which is the local language there. But only after I started going to college south of the river, I learned to speak where I learned to speak in Marathi. I really didn't need to use it up until then, which was, it was really like a completely different scene altogether. Like there's two Punes already. And Pune in general, it feels like a very small, sleepy town. Like it did then. It doesn't anymore. Like that Pune doesn't exist anymore. And like a very small town. It's like a big city, but it feels like everyone knows everyone. Like even now, if I meet someone from Pune, we'll probably know like at least 5 to 6 people in common. It's just there's so much intermingling, and you get like this small town feel, and there are geographically it's beautiful. There are these little hills around the city, and you just congregate at the hills pretty much regularly on the weekends. You'll find lots of people there. Everyone's bringing their dogs. It's just a very nice, lovely town, and I do yearn for that city that almost doesn't exist anymore. But yeah,
Raj, let's get the Jabalpur story,
Uh,
which is why we got here, because
I mean,
my spectrum.
after that, to learn, I mean, of course, I was born actually in Raipur, which is in Chhattisgarh, but my family has been living in Jabalpur for three, well, if you count me, then 3 generations now. Extended family from paternal side, most of them have been living in Jabalpur MP. In terms of how the city felt, see, this is what I kind of try to explain to a lot of people when the people that I know in India, who, like my parents even, who've largely lived in India for most of their lives, is if you have only experienced X, then there is no comparative framework that you have for you to compare it to Y or Z, right? So when I was growing up, I mean, Jabalpur felt like the world. It was everything. I mean, there, within Jabalpur, as you were talking about, Richa, I mean, it's Jabalpur, but within Jabalpur, there's an area where more posh people live. There's an area where the new rich live, and then the rest of the city and everything. Uh, in terms of schooling, again, those who listen to the BJPod know that I come from a hardcore Sanghi family. My dad would never send me to a convent. So I started with the army school because Jabalpur has a big cantonment presence. But sixth class, I was moved to a school called Bharshi Vidya Mandir, where on Wednesday and Saturdays we would wear kurta pajama as school uniform and do a transcendental meditation every day before the day began and when it ended. But it was my world, right? That is how I saw the whole world. And when we were talking about like earlier, right, when Megh and Vatsal were talking about how they've dealt with their PhDs and all, I a question that I had for you guys, and maybe we could come to it slightly later, is there is a tendency I've noticed, especially with like Desis, maybe more Northeast, is we try to look for the shortcut to whatever the idea of success is at that point. So uh, my engagement with my education was very peripheral. I come from a family where my father's side is they're again all like my father. There are four brothers, three are engineers, one is doctor, but all from Jabalpur. And my dad essentially studied in Jabalpur, got a job in Jabalpur, has retired in Jabalpur, has a house in Jabalpur now. And basically, all of his brothers have similar kind of trajectories. So my idea of success was to kind of just get into like a good engineering college. Did I personally care about science? I still don't think I do, but that is what I kind of knew back then. Now when I look back, I think had I had better role models, my role models were my dad and my elder bhaiyas in the family who were all the same story, right? But I would probably not have, I'm not made to be in tech, I feel. Or at least like to engage with tech in the way that I have to right now. Then engineering and masters in US. Again, my masters in US is also in information systems, which is frankly, it's just an easy pathway to get an H1B job. That's it. I tell people it's like a tech slanted MBA type thing, but because it's from the business school and all of that. But it's just that. And back then, why I chose all these things is because, again, I was conditioned to see success in a specific way. So I would probably like, I don't know if this sounds depressing, but like
Yeah.
this is kind of how I had my experience growing up.
Well, it's not depressing. It's everyone's story from UP, MP.
Yeah, it's everyone's story.
Just had one follow-up, Raj. Like, so you do come from a Bengali family, right? And you're in a Bengali family growing up in north of India. So there are cultural expectations from being Bengali, and there's also the lived experience of being in North India where everyone's a little different. So did you find that kind of pressure to maybe read more books or be more than what is expected from a North Indian young boy?
Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting because for the longest time, I think throughout my schooling, actually, I was trying to hide that side of my identity. I wanted to come across more as a North Indian. I was like, so my mum is is a Bengali, like she has lived a lot of her life in West Bengal, although her family also moved to Central India, but she has that accent when she talks in Hindi, right? And for a long time, it bothered me. I wanted to come across as like naughty, because everybody was around me, right? Now, in hindsight, I can tell you that if you grow up as a Bengali in a place like Jabalpur, which has a decent Bengali population, by the way, you still take more of your non-Bengali side than the Bengali. But what happened is, at some point, I think during my latter, like school years and early engineering, where my rebellion was becoming Bengali, I guess. So then I started reading more. Thankfully, I had like a lot of elder cousins and buas and all who were into reading. I had access to good fiction, so I was reading a lot of like fiction and all, which I also think also helped with my English, I guess. Because if you not to diss, of course, everyone is coming from their own kind of circumstances, right? But if you talk to anybody else from my school right now who was with me, they may not have as easier time talking in English as I do.
I pretty much relate to that. I mean, because I grew up in Delhi and because I was constantly meeting my cousins, people coming to my town, me going to Jabalpur for the summer, me going to Chennai for the summer, to going to like deep south to our hometown. It was that difference between my like the 9 months I spent in Delhi and the 3 months I spent away were quite stark. And yeah, English was one of those things where the structured immersion was you go to a place where either if it's Jabalpur, it's easy, at least everybody is speaking Hindi, तो उतना switch नहीं करना पड़ता, सीधा आप हिंदी में ही बात कर लो. और थोड़ा साउथ जाओ तो ना हिंदी ना अंग्रेजी, सीधा like you just have to find your Tamil so you can actually talk to everybody around you for a few months. It always did put Delhi as that a different category than all the other places that I was visiting. Even in this context, with regard to schooling, I relate to what Richa was saying about. I mean, again, it's a city with a lot of major schools, and I went to one of the asshole production factories that Delhi has. You just come out, you have like the only individual expression you have is me. You go on to another city and you try to be a little less of an asshole than all of the other Delhi people around you. So you stand out a little bit. But yeah, and in terms of exposure, it's exactly this. Like the schooling system is totally set up to not allow you to express those parts of you that any child has. You know, if one gets lucky with parents, one gets lucky with culture. Vatsal, did we get to you? We didn't, right? So where did you grow up and what?
I grew up in Allahabad. I still call it Allahabad. I'm not going to call it Prayagraj for whatever.
Your
So,
Vatsal Prayagrajya.
अरे यार. Anyway, like Raj said, his school was called Maharshi Vidya Mandir. My school was called Maharshi Patanjali Vidya Mandir. Okay, where we were also basically Tuesdays ko Hanuman Chalisa padhte the in assembly, all of that. But somewhere I got lucky because there were 3 or 4 teachers that I had in that school that were actually amazing, quite amazing. They used to like teaching, and that is how they used to teach us science, history, math, or even Hindi. That is how I got introduced to, actual learning. And I had the privilege of having, my parents. They made me kind of ambitious. They were like, whatever you have to do, like you should do something big. Every middle class family raises their kids. Pushed me to do something big. And it was not even just IIT or become a doctor or anything, but they were like, just don't be something that everybody is trying to do. Marks अच्छे हैं तो कोई ऐसे जरूरी नहीं है कि तुम्हें IIT JEE ही जाना है. You can do BCom, but be ambitious, think big, things like that. And they were the ones who would always, give me books, literature, and like, कि पढ़ो इसको, ये करो, वो करो. That's why I call it a privilege, because not everybody has that. That is what made me chase after knowledge product creation now, as we are. But if I talk about the city, the my peers or my friends and my immediate relatives and everybody else. It was just like any other sleepy small town, you know. If not for certain privileges and factors that which I just mentioned, I would have also just stayed there, did my engineering from one of those UP colleges, and would have been satisfied with that IT or I don't know, software job somewhere in UP. In terms of language, I couldn't even speak much English till I was in, I think, class 11th and 12th. That is when I moved out from that ecosystem of Allahabad where you would read English, but you would never have to speak it. So I could read it in books, but then when it was time to like speak, I couldn't. And that is when my parents they sent me to a residential school in Noida. Megh, you just called the asshole creation. In fact, it was Amity ka school, so you can imagine.
Oh,
तो
okay.
Oh,
I went to an
that's
asshole
familiar.
factory. I didn't go to that asshole factory. Stand
इतना
with
ज्यादा
me.
मेरे
difference नहीं
सारे
है.
cousins Amity में गए हैं.
Right. So then there was this added pressure of, you know, like अभी तो English में ही बोलना पड़ेगा. Like nobody speaking in Hindi. So जैसे तैसे करके like you just have to. Because you know the language, so you just have to. And that is when I started.
That's such a valuable point that you made. When it comes to exposure, the way things are set up in India, whatever our structural things are, English is the only way to do it. And the sooner one has access to English, the sooner one has access.
Yeah.
What was all of your relationship with English? Like when did it make an appearance? What did it look like growing up? And looking back, like, is it a complicated relationship? Is there a way in which you wish things were a little bit different? That's my question. And yeah, Vatsal, go ahead.
So I just wanted to add to our last point that, you know, we were talking about English and speaking English. The thing was that even when you wanted to read stuff, na, Hindi mein, the kind of books that I was interested in were just not available. There will be books, there will be literature available. But the thing is, as a kid, I was very interested in reading encyclopedias, those kind of things that would just blow my mind. I would just randomly open a page and it's like, oh, aisa bhi hota hai, right? Like there are volcanoes that do this, and there are dinosaurs that look like that, and things like that that my parents gave me access to. I could only do it because I knew English. Because if I were to only rely on Hindi at that time, there was no way I could have done that. And that, you know, that access to that language made me addicted to, you know, getting my mind blown. कि ऐसे कोई भी page खोलो, and then oh this, oh that, and that is how that, you know, I've been chasing that addiction of, you know, getting that high on information since. So that was a big part, was the language in a way.
Yeah, I think for most folks, their journey in English literature actually begins with their teachers, right? So for me, it was the same. You know, we had this fantastic teacher all through school, and this is in Pune, in fact. Like, I wasn't super into the language, and specifically, like, I would read a lot, but not engage with it until you're a certain age, of course. So around the sixth grade, we got this phenomenal teacher in English who would try to, you know, encourage discussions about the things that we were reading. And one of the things that they did in our state board school is up until the eighth standard, I think we had CBSE textbooks for English, just for English alone. So and those chapters were so much more interesting. Like the first thing I would do every year whenever we would get our English textbook is read every single chapter.
Me too.
And the same teacher taught us both English and history, actually. So with both of these topics, I was fortunate enough to have a teacher that really engaged with the topic, like made us, you know, even read our essays aloud in class, you know, talk through what we are thinking when we're writing certain things, and also talking about the history, especially when you're learning historical things, the building that happens behind the event that's maybe just two lines on the page. I still remember to date, she was talking about how Kashmir became a part of India. And all of that myth building I found out is completely fake. But and at least it built a specific interest in, like, okay, history is not just the words that are written on the page. And with English, it's especially with poetry, there is so much more meaning behind every single word that is chosen, every single line that is used to convey a specific meaning, the choice of words, the way they're phrased. So yeah, I think I was fortunate enough to be in a nice school with a couple of nice teachers.
I have a very complicated relationship with this language. I think a part of me really held on to this because at some point during my school years, I kind of recognized that I am not going to be like a mathematical genius or like a something like in physics or something. And so what I did was I became this guy who spoke well. And a couple of kind of accidents, I guess, that happened were a lot of the teachers, especially like English and all, were not as we every year, right around half yearlies, we will get fall behind our syllabus, especially in English and like languages, because sometimes those periods were like deprioritized compared to like math or something, right? That's how things are. So what our teachers would start to do is they will stop teaching us the chapters itself, and they will just and this happened in English, Hindi, and social sciences, so history, civics, geography. That they will stop teaching us, and they will essentially like have notes from the previous years, and they will just kind of read out the notes, and we'll just take the notes and then regurgitate them in the exam. And so at some point, they will also be lazy about it. And so puberty hit me like really early, I guess. So my voice broke. Grade seventh, onwards, I was asked to they'll ask me to read. Engaging with that material in that way kind of helped me over time to just work on the way kind of I spoke. And then, of course, as I said, I had cousins and all who would watch films, American films, and also read. Also, like read, bole to, like Nelson Boone and Eric Segel and all of that. But read at least. I engage with that. But for me, escaping Jabalpur, or I did want to escape my immediate like surround. I wanted to be different. My parents' idea of success has always been like even now, if you ask my mom and dad what I did for my grad school, I don't think they'll be able to tell you exactly like what my grad school like masters was. But this is kind of my learning. I'm going to be 38 next year. All of our life essentially becomes an act of passing as someone, passing as a version of what we want to be seen as. And one of the things that I have always wanted to pass as is a specific kind of Desi, which I'm not. As I said, Jabalpur, Barchi, but I'm not that person. But I do want to pass, call it my inferiority complex or however you want to define it. But I do want to pass off as someone who studied in Delhi, or like I want to have that impression. And I think all through my life, I knew that one of the ways that you do it is how not just to speak English, but speak English in a certain way. It's an interesting situation to be in now because even now I'm like dealing with this thing where I'm constantly trying to finesse how I speak, if that makes sense, and it just goes on. But like ultimately, like it goes back to this thing that I don't want to be in this shell that I am in, I guess, of my like and so I'm trying to kind of project something else. Therapy session, but as I guess.
It makes sense. And just to add to that, it's passing ki baat jab aati hai, to it's not even just passing as one particular person. Like sometimes when the groups change, I feel like there are so many other identities that one needs to pass as. Abhi aap log ke saath hu to okay, let's just lean into the North Indian side of things. Abhi इसी call पे अगर चार लोग होते साउथ से तो the accent would be different, the pressure to be a different version of myself would be different. And it's so true for English as well, where if one leans too much into a certain kind of English accent, it becomes pretentious, right? You lean away from it too much, you lose on some of those whatever status markers. And so it's like this constant kabaddi ki theek hai idhar jao thoda sa ye karo, then oh but I don't want to sound like Ananya Pandey, so let me like drag myself back into this space. But okay, abhi thoda it's going too much into Kangana Ranaut territory, and I respect her, but I know that the English that she speaks and her struggle, it's not one that I want to emulate. So let me bring myself back to some kind of a center. That struggle is
So absolutely right. So this version of me is like I have my spectrum is there's a PCCI episode from like years ago with Jared Kimber. That from there to like the average way I talk in the BJPod, that's kind of my spectrum.
Did you ever find that you were punished for that? Like once your English elevates beyond that of your peers. When I was in my engineering college, like I said, it was in a completely different side of town. We would have annual festivals, and Pune is really known for a lot of cultural festivals. And we would have a debate competition, and I would have like this coterie of like 4 or 5 other people, maybe juniors, maybe seniors. We would get together and we debate on these topics, and then we would organize a debate for a lot of other students from other colleges. And I found that my teachers specifically were extremely resentful of the people who were within that group. And I'm still trying to figure out why. And I think like it may have something to do with maybe we were more arrogant. And a lot of these same people, they were all from outside Pune as well. Like
I found a workaround for myself. Now, because I'm Tamil, all I have to do is say my last name, and I get clocked as a South Indian. And then me speaking good English becomes a factor of me growing up in a South Indian family. So, yes, you're in the north. Oh, Angrezi bahut achhi hai. Oh, acha Tamil. Acha, oh, South se ho. Acha, very good, very good. Continue. So then like you lose out. That punishing aspect goes away. But the other workaround that I found was for me that getting that right flavor becomes not just with English, but with Hindi. So, or Hindi, Urdu, whatever. So, us point pe, one has to make sure that one is really good at that, at switching. And if you're able to speak Hindi with the right Sanskritized like lexicon or the extreme Urdu Persianized lexicon, and your Hindi is as good, if not better, than your English, then it becomes a marker of, oh yeah, you speak really good English, but see, like tumhari Hindi or yeah, tumhari Hindi Urdu itni achhi hai, wow, like your dialect is so good, your this is so good. So you get forgiven for your perception people have of your English because you're also grounded in it, and that makes a big difference because everyone else in the room, it's much harder to have that kind of mastery and control over 2 languages. I'm not saying I did a good job, but I guess I did a better job than everybody else because it was that switching that saved me from that punishment. Vatsal, like, what about you?
I was never very good at the spoken aspect of any of the languages, so I never had to face it for myself. But then, yes, I did see it happen because in NITs, there is this certain group of students which would come as, direct admission from abroad. So they were called DASA students. They're taken in by SAT exam scores, I think.
Yes.
And they would speak that Americanized language dialect that they learned English in. And they would be just ostracized by most of the professors because of the way they speak English, which was very fluent, which was very clean, and sort of sounded like how you would hear it in TV shows or movies. Somehow they were westernized. I never understood why that hatred, where it came from, but it used to happen. Yes.
Crabs in a bucket a little bit.
I guess, yeah.
Because I went to college in DU, again, there was always the college space and the university/city space. So within the college space, before anyone who may not be familiar with this, admissions are extremely driven by grades. And so basically you are with a million other people who have your exact background, who have your exact academic record, and like you're just clones of each other within your college. Because you're in that clone space, you are like conforming to the in-group, and there's not much you can do if you went to like a college where the grades were 99% wala jo college wale jo group wale college hain. Everybody is an overachiever. Kya hi kar loge? But the moment you leave that college space, you're clone town, and you go into the actual like city, you go for university events, you face that same what the NRI students kind of face. In a way, you kind of get hit with the same thing. Everybody else is not the same as you, and they are fighting like a completely different battle where they're being bullied for different things. It's the same fight where once you go out, you have to know exactly when and how to switch to whatever expectations are there. So like Richa was saying, so that you don't get ostracized outside your like safe space.
Yeah, and it could also be because of the emulation part that Raj was saying, right? Like, because I could understand that people were hated on because they were not, like you were saying, they're not clones of the uh, group of students who come from, I don't know, Middle East or America or whatever. But then why would the professors hate on those kids? I never could understand, and maybe it was because the professors also wanted to emulate that kind of spoken language.
और मे बी एनआरआई
or
कोटा ना मतलब
that
एनआईटी में
too,
घुसना
of
ऐसा
course.
इजी थोड़ी है बट ऐसे फ्लाइट में आके लैंड करके भाई एनआईटी में एडमिशन वो भी मतलब आपके पैसे पे. If any NRI people are listening, I don't hate you. I'm just saying.
Not hate, but like anger that MTech people get in the IITs, right? Matka and all. Like, not, they are seen as the other. It's the one thing that we, as in Indians, as South Asians, I guess, are very good at is creating these in groups versus out groups. So it's easy, like if someone has a different, to what you said, Megh, right? I think a benefit of being a Tamil or a Bengali in North India is that you don't get the local language accent, right? So our
You can have it, but you can choose
yeah,
to
I mean,
not
yeah,
have it.
I mean, with friends, maybe you try, but like, so I think we inevitably end up being good at like speaking Hindi. Good bole to, I'm not saying that, but like sh ko sh bol ke sir nahi boleंगे, which a lot of people at least do in every, right? Uh, तो I and also because I guess I am a bad guy. You don't get a lot of you're always part of like the in group, right? Because of a lot of factors that go into your making. I don't know what that hate is, if there is. And I also participated in a lot of debates and organized tech fest and all of that. The only kind of thing that I felt to that, if at all, was with my immediate like college mates who would always like call me out, and some of us out as like अरे बड़े लोग आ गए वाला. And it's primarily because you were like doing more than like just your textbook engineering stuff. उसके अलावा तो I don't think so.
Badi log is that one phrase that's never been used in a good context.
Yeah.
It's mostly used to pull
Yeah.
people down. Arey, badi log.
That only happened when I was in the NCC. So I had like this day life where whatever, I live in a certain part of Delhi that gets perceived a certain way. Whatever, I speak English a certain way. I went to a certain school, a certain college, and then you kind of leave all of that behind and you go into this space where everyone does not come from that same space. Whether you want to or not, you become by default like the brat. When you're there, there's no getting out of it. Then if you speak good English, or if you try to curry favors with groups, it's because of what your parents did. Like the writing on the wall with regard to like BJP coming into power. It was so obvious sitting in that NCC cantonment area with other people who were really trying to make it, and who the latent rage which was there, which was very easy to miss during my schooling. It was very easy to miss even in my college space, given how controlled it was. In that space, it was that rage of people who had those aspirations, who saw what was going on and decided that the blame squarely falls on people who already, because of their parents, got that privilege, or people who are gaining that privilege because we live in a country that offers support in systemic ways to people who are born Dalit and Bahujan. I think we can kind of move on to to the education system and careers. How did all of you get to the point that you did? And I think all of us have quite a diversity of career paths, and the relationship that you have with where you grew up to what you are now, Raj.
I have a very boring path actually. I did engineering from like a basic ass college. then took my GREs and I moved for grad school. It is so strange because up until
How did you know about it? Sorry.
GRE?
GRE as well as information systems.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get contact for it?
The GRE basically I knew because a couple of seniors in the college took it. So I was preparing for CAT actually, and the vocabulary section is somewhat similar. Similar in the sense you have to gaming the system. GRE you mug up the word meanings, I guess. And then at CAT also you do some sort of comprehension. So like there's this similarity. So I actually took GRE without any intention to move to the US. I took GRE a month before my CAT exam to prepare for my CAT. And I ended up doing like my GREs. And then in my CAT, I did all right, but I could not get through any IIMs. I had a couple interviews, but I could not get through. So the point was, it was just the idea of prestige, I guess. So I was like, if I end up going to like again a non-IIM school, it will be that same thing again as engineering. So I decided to instead use the GRE route. Now, the information systems, I had zero clue, boss. The day I took my GRE, like when you take GRE, you can apply to 4 schools for free. Your score, report your scores. I actually reported my scores to 4 university for communications engineering because my engineering is electronics and communication. One of the days, I was in my college canteen. I met this other guy from IT who was also going through the same process, and he told me that he's applying XYZ. इस पे कर रहा है वो. This is like after like weeks after months, if not after I've taken my GRE and all that. Then I came back to my dorm and I looked it up. The only thought that I had was it looks easier than communication engineering. It still has some elements of like human personality, like involvement. So I was like, might as well do this. And then that's how I kind of, so there was no like serious planning or anything. And even now, I often say this that I think at this point in my life, everything that I have in terms of like career, finances, everything, I think is primarily because of the fact that I can speak English well, I think. Because I do not feel that I have any other discernible qualities in outside of it. It's the same. MIS was the laziest department even then. It's
I didn't know what it was till I came
yeah,
here, and
and the
then
thing is, it's a way to get easy H1B, or it used to be. I don't know how it will be now, but it used to be. If I knew what I know now, I would probably not do any of it. But at that point, that was like what I kind of understood. So, a product of my conditioning and then the desire to kind of come across more prestigious to the rest of the family. My dad is number 3 in 4 brothers. Eldest uncle, his son is Ayub Ahmedabad. My the uncle right before my dad, he has a daughter. She's ISB. So if I ended up going to like SP Jain or Narsi Monji or something, it would have been, so that is why I was like, chalo, ab US chalte hain. Nothing more.
given that this call, like I'm sure many of
Yeah.
our listeners are imposter syndrome se kafi waqif hain, and I have to say that I hear a lot of it in what you're saying, and based on what I know from your podcast as well as your writings, I know that it's more than just the ability to speak a language.
I think I engage with that side of my life much more seriously than I engage with the side that I should engage with, that is like academia or professional. Like abhi bhi, there is a certain amount of like laziness, not wanting to like जिस चीज के लिए पैसे मिलते हैं वो करने का मन ही नहीं होता. Like I just keep devising in my head, this is my ways to escape this and do something more meaningful. I don't, as you were talking about, like India during your NCC experience, right? To me, feels very difficult for me to move back to India and live like a peaceful life there. And that is now what's kind of keeping me plugged into like this system. Because uske alawa, like there are very There are not many things. So I'm in cybersecurity, by the way, now. So I work in the area of like regulatory compliance around security and privacy. There are people who are so like people are writing books about it, and people are like, doing so much. And I just try to get through the day, then focus on the things that you just talked about, I guess.
I could quote Karl Marx, but let's not do that today. Richa, what about you?
Okay, my story is a little bit longer क्योंकि मुझे तो engineering करनी ही नहीं थी. All throughout my secondary school and high school, I actually wanted to be a journalist and I wanted to write because I loved writing. I don't write as much as I want to. In fact, I don't write at all anymore. But that is what I wanted to do. And I also really hated biology. So these are the two ideas that formed my my career. In my 11th and 12th, when you kind of have to you have to choose arts or science or commerce. I chose science because my dad is like, hey, you will have more options open to you. And I was like, yeah, मुझे पर biology करनी नहीं है. So we have this option called a vocational course. Now, this is for people who want to learn things like scooter repair, refrigerator repair, so that they can learn the trades. I had computer science as a vocational course. I did quite okay in that in my 12th exams. In fact, that was the only course that I found interesting at all. Physics was okay, but chemistry and math, not my thing. I told my dad, hey, I just want to take up arts. And he's like, nope, that's that's not going to work out. I think you might as well do your degree in engineering, and then if you really still want to pursue that, then go ahead. So I went into engineering, of course, and electronics and telecommunication, similar to you, Raj. And I hated it for the first couple of years because our professors don't know how to make the basics interesting. Learning about op amps and stuff, I was just like, this is the most boring thing in my entire life. But by the time I got into third and fourth year of engineering, I actually really started enjoying it. I especially like microprocessors and embedded systems, which is the only thing in which something happens in your labs. You switch on, LED on ho jata hai, and motors start running and things start working. So I was like, okay, this seems like I'm doing something that is actually has an immediate impact and I can see its usefulness. GRE, I had no plans of going to the US, but my friends were giving me GRE and they were going for classes for GRE, which I thought was ridiculous. What happened is in Pune, there was a swine flu epidemic, which shut down our engineering colleges for about 3 weeks. So I was like, yaar, abhi kya karu 3 hafte ke liye? And my best friend was studying for GRE in that time. So I was like, chalo, I'll also give the GRE exam. No intention of going abroad still at this point. Finished the GRE. I didn't apply to any schools. I just continued on with my education. And then I started a job in Pune. And it was at a very small company. And I found that job really interesting. But what they were doing is they were paying me only 8,000 rupees per month for the first 3 months. And then they're like, okay, after that, we will give you a pay bump to 10,000 rupees. And I was like, there is no way I can even afford the two-wheeler that I'm riding to this job in on this kind of a salary. Like, there's just to do that. And my managers made like 20,000 rupees per month, which is also crazy. I have no idea how they were making it work. And I was like, I'm enjoying this. I'm learning a lot, but I'm not getting paid really anything to do here. And I want to go more into tech, into this field. So that is when I was like, yeah, yahan meri dal galne nahi wali. I have to apply to the US. And I applied for computer engineering and embedded systems. And yeah, that was fantastic. Like, I loved studying during my master's. It was such a moving and transformative experience for me. I remember in the first semester I went and I was doing this course called Introduction to Algorithms. So computer algorithms. In the midterms, everyone in the class did pretty badly. So our professor's like, hey, so it looks like one, you guys are not learning, and two, obviously the marks don't reflect that you're learning anything at all and there's no output. So what he did is he's like, I'm going to change your final exam to a final project. And you guys are going to have to change everything about this course and how you're doing this course just focus on one single algorithm and apply it in different ways and do the actual coding and demonstrate that it works and find out, which ones have better time complexity, space complexity, things like that, which are really important in terms of efficiency of the code that you're writing. And I was just like, my mind was blown by that course. Like, I got an A in that course. I'm so proud of this A. This is the grade that I'm most proud of in my entire life. After that, I think in my career path, the first couple of years, I didn't really enjoy what I was doing. What happened is I also got laid off in early job, one of the first jobs that I did. My entire team was gone, only one person was left. So after that, I realized I was like, I need to be more serious about my career. And I need to also really take an interest in what I'm doing and do it well. And that is the swift kick that I got to start doing much better in my career. And after that, I've really enjoyed what I've been doing. It's a very weird roundabout way to come to your career path, but
I just wanted to know how many Desis were in your batch? That's all.
about 100.
Out of?
I think in the whole master's program, about 300. I think a third of them were Indians or even more. But in my specific course, there were very few Indians.
So that also kind of changes. Not to this, but to this. The moment the Desi number crosses a certain threshold, it again becomes about not learning, but making sure that you get X grade. And then people will like beg, borrow, steal, essentially. And then if everyone else around you is like that, it just becomes like you cannot, as Megh said, MIS in itself is not very academically like it's like a machine. But on top of it, if you have like this mindset as you kind of go through this, it's just not the best.
Something that is different about a PhD program, even if most of your department is full of Desis, the way the system is set up, like the exploitative work hours, the kind of competition that is required to get in, the hours that the job needs you to put in, that the system gaming people kind of get filtered out because it's never worth the effort. There is no one who will say ki, my PhD was worth it even though it broke me. So yeah, like, and when one chooses certain paths which are anti-gaming the system, that part gets filtered out. But of course, in our day-to-day lives, in our classrooms, we are still studying with other Desis, right? So if I'm in a natural language processing, statistical NLP, machine learning class, a third of my class is Desi. They're just not in a PhD program. They are definitely trying to game the system, and them trying to game the system means that the faculty who is teaching loses that interest, or they are also noticing ki this group of people, for whatever constraints that they have, they seem to not come in with the same kind of passion as, say, another group of people who are studying the same thing but for a different reason.
There was a really interesting incident at my school here, which is the previous batch in the field that was filled with Desis. Mine was not, I just had 3 Desis in my class, but the previous batch that was filled with Desis in a different field, they caught the entire lot for plagiarism. And the way they caught them is because this one guy, he didn't even bother to change the file name of the file that needed to be submitted, the model. So एक MATLAB model submit हुआ था, उसने file name में change नहीं किया, and then the TA of course got them.
मेरे क्लास में मतलब there was this constant discussion of plagiarism. There was this constant ऊपर से top down thing कि don't do it. And so I was like, okay, I guess something must have happened. So I am going to go to every single office hours, even if I am discussing my project and working collaboratively with other people, which was allowed. I'm still going to put in every possible effort to show that I worked on this problem from scratch, and I really need to not be like the students from MIS.
So
and
this happened so I started in fall 2011. The previous batch, apparently, it happened everywhere. The Desis were caught in plagiarism.
And they're always caught in a group.
Yeah. And the first like orientation day, the department head gave this speech, which in hindsight, I don't know how you guys would like it could be quantified as is almost racist adjacent because he talked about how in India consent means different, and in the US, like he specifically mentioned India, no other country. Uh, Consent means different. In the US, consent is different, blah, 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 sab kuch. And then someone in my batch was also caught cheating in the first semester itself. What do you do with that? And again, Desi. But that's not the point.
Representing us.
This is what I was talking about when people engage with. I was so lazy that I would not even bother doing that. This will like take a discussion into a whole different direction. But that is why, like, my initial question to you guys about like how like innovation is stymied as you kind of go through the Indian school system and then how you kind of let it flourish here was based on all these things, because there are certain things present in the way I was brought up, which felt like your value is only seen in that rank to AIR, for CGPA, for उससे पहले marks, अब अभी like salary, like unless you can quantify,
गाड़ी का कलर,
हाँ,
घर का
हाँ,
साइज,
unless you
बीवी की नौकरी
exactly,
कैसी है.
unless you can quantify it, there is just no abstract understanding of anything else. Like ये नहीं बोल सकते कि मेरे को like I really love my job because it gives, that doesn't mean anything to anyone. कितना कितना मिलता है पैसा? Like my mom, no fault of hers. This is just like every few months she'll ask me what my salary is and what does that mean in Indian currency. And the only reason she does it is because she feels great. That gets tough, right?
I think what really breaks my heart more than anything is that an alternative is possible. And the more I talk to everybody, the more I understand ki having, for example, a person's, both of their parents have graduation and post-graduation degrees. The impact that that has on a person's upbringing versus a person, who with whom it's a single parent income, where only one parent was able to get collegiate exposure. कितना फर्क पड़ जाता है इससे. And going back even one generation, like, yeah, if your grandparents, both male and female, went to college, tiny, small number of people in India, the impact that it has 2 generations down the road, right? And the fact that it's so hard to explain that this alternative is possible because of the sheer population size. मेरा सबसे बड़ा frustration यही होता है कि when I was in India, again, because humanities department, then I later went to a central university. A lot of my friends were extremely progressive. कहीं से भी उनका economic background status कुछ भी हो. In college, we were like, we were reading theory. Yes, cringe. I never had to debate basic shit like basic economic theory with them. I never had to convince anyone ki secularism, why is secularism good or bad, or why do women deserve rights. In my life, I've never had to argue with somebody in my collegiate space. What are Indian women like going through, in like not myself but just in general. क्योंकि हम लोग सब एक understanding के साथ आते हैं कि हाँ भाई shit is real. We are privileged to study, and one way in which our privilege takes us, the only thing we can do with our privilege is make sure that we lead our country into a progressive space. You leave all of that, you come to the US, and every I meet here who happens to be Desi, yes, male, hashtag not all men, but I have to start from that basic. Yes, okay, look at education degree levels for women, look at it for men. Caste is real or not. I'm like, what happens to the group of people who manage to make it in the US? Like, what is the strong correlation between being deeply regressive, being conservative in your personal life, but faking progressivism in your public life and ending up in the US? Like, why are like all my progressive friends, all of my friends whom I love and care about, why are all of them in India and not here? So yeah.
Something that I've noticed is that whenever you talk about something like this, you add a cringe या कुछ. I think you, for example, are coming from a place, especially like your undergrads, I believe, or maybe even after it, where you were surrounded by people who shared that view of the world. So I think your threshold of like something real and substantial is much higher for me. I cannot be part of my school WhatsApp group. I cannot be part of my engineering college WhatsApp group. And grad school, the reason I left that WhatsApp group was because of a Kannada female batchmate. The kind of things that they will put, even like basic shit is very like valuable. Because the world that I have seen, and not just in India, but like even here with like so-called like people taking home 500K annually, right? The thoughts and the way they see the world is so regressive, and more than like regressive in their own lives, the way they dehumanize groups. I basically like जो the things that you know close off as saying cringe, उतना मिल जाएगा तो मैं तो मतलब like धन्य हो जाऊंगा, I guess. So it's so I was just as you were saying, so I was thinking about this.
Like I said, वो एक कबड्डी होती है ना, pretentiousness and authenticity के बीच में, कि हाँ, yes, what was I doing in my undergraduate? I was reading Foucault, I was reading Derrida, मेरे सिलेबस में था, मैं क्या करूं? हाँ, woke mind virus, मुझे ये बेसिक चीजें डिबेट कभी करनी नहीं पड़ी थी, क्योंकि हम लोग like we were trying to figure out कि how do we communicate this to people who are now saying that, you know, all of the things that are on our syllabus is like terrible and anti-India and whatever, anti-Indian culture. And I'm like, bro, look at India's relationship with Soviet Russia. Like, we are a free country. हमारा freedom struggle Russia ने fund किया है. तुम्हें problem है, you deal with it in your own life. Bhagat Singh communist था, like Leninist था. तुम्हें problem है, I cannot help you deal with your discomfort with these systems, because like that is where we come from. And today that lineage is being kind of.
This is so funny. You were reading Foucault. So during my grad school, I was reading Arundhati Roy's An Ordinary Person's Guide to an Empire. Just reading. And one of my roommates, who's a guy from Lucknow, he was upstairs. He walked downstairs. He saw me reading it, and he used the B word. And he's like, "Why are you reading that B?" And I'm like, "Dude, पढ़ ले, तू पढ़ ले, and like then you can criticize." मतलब मैं I would not even touch that book. And this is like before Modi. This is like 2011-12 की बात कर रहा हूँ. This is like Modi का PM candidate भी नहीं बना था बीजेपी का. Because I have this. I think this you could call it the male kind of mediocre male confidence, yeah, however you want to define it. But I could become provocative in certain like these kind of spaces. So I would talk about the Indian army and human rights violation, and I had people in that cohort who would justify like the kind of atrocities that we as normal humans should not even think about. So,
But
yeah.
one thing that
Yeah,
I
this
just
is-
wanted to add to that is like we were talking about why is it that everybody here is like the way they are. So we have to look at, and I think this has been discussed many times in other podcasts too. What is that population that comes here, right? What is the filter, right? And if we understand that, then it makes a lot of sense. Ki why are people?
Raja beta.
Huh, that's just one part of it, right? Like it's just that the kind of privileges that you need to have back in India that makes you capable enough to come to another country, right? That itself is such a big filter that will give you, like, first of all, of course, it's not a black and white answer, but caste privilege. It will give you a privilege of money. It will give you privilege of, in a way, also male privilege. All of those things, everything combined, and then it starts making sense that okay, why you think the way you think makes sense. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say.
Even yes, the caste and gender filter is very valid. It just amazes me that even in this group of people, I know that there are deeply progressive people. There are wonderful people who read. It's just, it would be very difficult for me to run into them in the US, because I don't know where that mediocrity filter is applied. People who come here, there is a certain structure with.
I see it purely as a matter of numbers. If you go back to India and you try to find people who would agree with Arundhati Roy's thoughts, you would be pressed to find a few, right? It's just the probability, like one in maybe, I don't know, I'm just making out numbers right now, 10,000 people. And if you go to UP, maybe even less. इतना बड़ा population यूपी से उठ के यहाँ पर आएगा, तो you will not be able to find anybody who is, progressive in the real terms.
When I say this progressive group, I don't mean there is a lot of progressive people who might be who are reading Arundhati Roy in Hindi, who are reading Arundhati Roy in other Indian languages and agreeing in a way that I don't even have the lived experience to.
But that's why I said it's not a black and white, but statistically speaking, that's what it looks like. I don't have the data to quote some statistical paper, but that's how it.
I was seeing some of this in India during my undergrad as well. So I happened to be in Pune when Raj Thackeray formed his own party, and the kind of fear that came with that for non-natives, right? So they would go into colleges and beat up North Indian students who would be living in the hostels, and because my college was in an area which was very different, like I said, culturally very different, the conversations that I was privy to that were happening, I was shocked at that point of time that you could actually have these kinds of conversations out in the open and be so openly, you know, awful, basically, to people who are your fellow citizens. I realized that even though this is my country, I feel very ostracized and alone at this point, even within a city, even though all of my friends are natives and they were all sympathetic to this fact. But I think that feeling that remained that point of time, like I still was privileged enough to not have any real consequences for me. But I could see that the seeds were there, right? So what we're seeing today, it is possible to whip up people's sentiments so that they're acting really crazy, including like one of my friends' grandmother said something कि हमारे लोगों को जॉब्स नहीं मिल रहे हैं, हम प्लम्बर्स कभी महाराष्ट्र नहीं होते हैं, सारे प्लम्बर्स बाहर के आते हैं, हमारे लड़कों को जॉब्स नहीं मिल रहा है. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just studying here, like my family's been here for a long time and they have been there for 10 years already, and it was a little bit weird, and my friend did apologize for her grandmother, but that is some experience that still remains with me.
Yeah, no, I think maybe in terms of my 20s, I spent most of my 20s in India, and I didn't come here till it was absolutely the only option. Spending all of that time in India, like spending in a way, my formative adult years in India, that is something that I did also notice, where things did progressively and slowly it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't just one election. There were so many things that led to it. And this is the week of Dr. Manmohan Singh's passing. And we hear a lot of these political parties expressing their condolences. But when Dr. Singh was the Prime Minister of India, how many people, like how many of our families were not making those jokes?
And those media houses, by the way.
Of course, and the fact that even as this whole myth of shining India and whatever India becoming superpower is happening, more and more people are leaving the country. More and more people are emigrating to a point where today it's become like a subject of national debate in another country, where I feel at some point that I am destined to go back. मेरे को ऐसा लगता है यहाँ की जिंदगी मेरी काफी simulation लगती है, like all the things that happen, the fact that everything works, the fact that people are actually kind and decent, walking around and not feeling afraid, all of this, it just feels like it's just a little break from reality. And ultimately it's very hard to imagine a future in this space because it doesn't feel real. That aspect of reality is like India, where you're constantly fighting for a tiny bit of space and a tiny little bit of room and some medium amount of success.
But I think we miss your story, Megh. That how did you get to where you are?
So I know we covered a lot of this in our How Did We Get Here
episode 1.
episode, but of course, but the TLDR is like much like Raj, like one of my friends in the philosophy department said that she was applying to a linguistics department, and I was like, chalo hum bhi kar lenge. Then I gave all the entrance exams. I did get admission into JNU, and again, this was before before all the explosions that happened, but my options were to join JNU, go the JNU way. There was some amount of pushback from my family, not too much. And the other option was to actually leave Delhi, go to another city and become a civilized human being. Like get away from from the assholery for a little bit and self-reflect and become a person. So I chose to go to Hyderabad. Hyderabad is this like really amazing place. You know, the tech people are there, the local people are there. You have culture, you have central universities, and finishing up my master's there, the next option was I didn't know what to do. So I spent 2 years working in an NGO. It was possible to see just how dark and ugly things are. And at that point, mera selfishness, it kicked in. And I was like, okay, if this is how bad things are, and this is how hard upward mobility is, and this is how easy it is to lose all the hard work that that a person's family puts in order to get above that economic crisis, then maybe I should also invest in not bringing the family economically down and like be responsible for myself. And like at that point, PhD seemed like an option where both my passion could be pursued and I could constantly keep my head above the economic water. The only viable way to do a PhD and actually live a decent life in India is to not do your PhD in India, because suicide rates, like people were dying every 1.5 years. I hear about somebody dying. And I was like, okay, maybe the only way to reduce my chances of death is to not be in India and like at least get a PhD somewhere else, which brought me here exactly 1 year before the pandemic.
And you want to go back to that system again, which pushes people to that? Is that what you want?
Well, like I said, it feels like destiny, right? मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि what I see in other, maybe it's a numbers thing, but I see that there is a formula for success even in the US. Like you have to have a certain kind of tunnel vision. You have to not know what is happening in the world. तुम्हें politics का कुछ पता नहीं होना चाहिए. अगर मोदी जी power में है तो your politics should be हाँ मोदी जी कर रहे हैं तो अच्छा ही होगा. अगर कांग्रेस पावर में है, मुझे कांग्रेस उतना पसंद नहीं है, बट ओके, आइडिया ऑफ इंडिया वेरी नाइस. लाइक देयर इज दिस लाइक there is this way of being which I feel is lacking in me, and so I'm like, I won't make it in this system because I have too much baggage of knowing what's going on, like doing more than what is expected of me in my job.
Question for you. Do you not feel that the same expectation will now be applied to you if you move to India? I'm talking about career-wise
too, because I don't come with the same. I'm competing with IITians, Bitsians, and engineers. So मेरे को पता है कि I will not get the same job as them.
Can I ask this question to Vatsal and Richa as well? Like, if tomorrow, due to some reasons, had to move to India permanently, how would you be feeling about it?
I want to think about this a little bit, because the thing that I enjoy the most in the US is the kind of equal opportunities to a large degree that are given to women compared to what happens in India. Here, I was able to be away from the societal pressure in India to get married. Like I could ignore it for some time. I still did get married, but to a person of my choice, not
Traitor.
Sorry, I was arranged, but then, since then it's been a constant barrage of when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? And, this constant feeling that you are less than because of things that are not related to you really at all, that are not always in your control. So that is the thing I dislike most about India, that you have to perform, and you feel the brunt of that societal pressure a lot more because it's all around you, it's involved everywhere. So I wouldn't be happy about that. I would still make my peace with it, because you closer to family, and that is the thing that I really miss, being close to my family and closer to more progressive friends. Then I am here. So, yeah, I wouldn't hate it, but what I would consider is maybe changing my field completely. Like I would maybe try and do something different.
Yeah, it's like, Vatsal, for me, the question is not like what happens if I have to move to India. The question is what happens if I have to move to Bangalore or Hyderabad, because that's where all the opportunities are. So I have to, as much as I love and respect Hyderabad, it's never been my city. And it has all the constraints that have always driven me crazy. I've fought against it for 6 years of my life. made my peace with it, whatever, but it never sat well with me. And for me, like that, going back is the ideal. Going back would be to go back to Delhi. The only way to go back to Delhi is to be a pretentious jhola chhap professor, which is near impossible in today's time, because our education system is being but yeah, if I could go back to Delhi, matlab, takte hind, like just get the throne, all of this exile shit will be worth it, and like life will be full circle.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think, I mean, academically, it will be a very big compromise. The only reason that I came here was because I tried to do what I currently do, medicine research back in India, and it was unbelievably like impossible for a student to do the way that we are doing. I mean, there are some institutes that they where you do have that kind of a research, but it's very few opportunities. So academically, it will be a very big compromise, and not just academically. I mean, once I differ from Megh's point of view a little bit, because I don't feel like I'm in a simulation if I don't have to go through that Delhi ka pollution, if I don't have to get through that academic system, which will punish you for your own productivity, which will be always against you. Nobody is a peer for you. So I see that this is a better fit for me. Yes, if I have to, then you do what you have to do to survive. But then that will never be my first option, because why would you? Academically, it is fulfilling for me right now in the system that I am. It has its own problems, of course. No system is, the utopian one, but it's giving me rewards the way I am seeing it. And even in my like personal life, I mean, it's not like I have to sit in pollution for 2 hours to get to the place of my work. My Wi-Fi would go, or I have to like go to a government office ka babu and like give him bribes to get my stuff done, not being a part of my
तुमको ये
reality.
सिमुलेशन ही लगता? इतना अच्छा AQI कैसे हो सकता है? ये this is not real. This is ये हम मैट्रिक्स में हैं.
I am fine with that simulation, na? That is what I'm saying.
16 का पता है, 16 एक ही हुआ है
I
अभी मेरे यहाँ.
know,
हाँ?
like
16 है, 16.
मेरे अभी 20
It is
कुछ है.
2 for me.
clear blue skies in the middle of December,
Yeah.
never seen in my entire life.
So,
So-
like, if there is a bunch of people who are getting it, why should it not be me also? It's not a simulation. It's just, and everybody should have that. A bunch of people are having it, then so should I. That's how I
No, I do not. But I have been thinking about this because, especially after this whole October 7th, a lot of people ask me this question, that how can you, with whatever you feel and think about, live in this country, live in US, that is the source of all the evils in the world and everything, right? And that's true. That's completely true. When I moved here in 2011, up until 2016, I was so sure that I'm going to go back. I was like, मास्टर्स किया 2-3 साल का वर्क एक्सपीरियंस तो इंडिया में like अच्छी पोजीशन मिल जाएगी, like you just move to India, be close to family, everything. In my experience, and as I see people around me, after you've spent 5-ish years in a country outside of India, you get kind of used to that life. And then after that, every time that you visit India, you feel like an outsider in many different ways. And then on top of it, more recently, what I'm realizing is that a certain level of dissociation is required to live anywhere. ठीक है, बोले तो यूएस है, प्रॉब्लम है, यूएस का फॉरेन पॉलिसी इज अ प्रॉब्लम, बट मैं अमेरिकन नहीं है, मैं नहीं है ये लोग, सो आई कैन डिसोसिएट माई सेल्फ. इन इंडिया, every person that I will live around and be with will be a mirror of me. And I hate that side of me, the caste privilege, the gender privilege, all of it. And when it will be like constantly like amplified around me, I think it would just become very difficult for me to even have like I'll end up taking a corporate role in India, right? Even surviving a day in that environment will be very, very difficult for me, because here again, I can dissociate. I've been lucky that after grad school, I haven't really had to work a lot with, so I can dissociate very well here. And that's the reason why this whole idea of moving to India has become like
Oh,
almost like the thing that I will do anything to avoid, essentially. Yeah, because I know that like people say a lot, like you can make a lot of money in India these days, especially like tech, especially with like this like more than a decade of experience in tech and all of that. But mm, like mental health would
Yeah.
survive, would not survive that. So that's why but I've to your point, Meg, what I realize is that if you can dissociate, like maybe gender, like in India,
Yeah.
as a woman, you can ascribe a lot of problems in India to men, which is true, right? Men, caste men, like so.
Yeah.
Not कहने का ये नहीं कि तुम ऐसा excuse नहीं है तुम्हारा वो, but you have that dissociative ability, which I just do not have when it comes to India, right? That's why it is. I feel, and that's why I asked like Richa and Vatsal, because I expected the answers to be in kind of line like where you, Richa, are a bit like, challenging hoga, but maybe, and Vatsal is like, I don't want to. And that's what I've realized. Ki maybe I don't know if Vatsal realizes this or not, but a part of it, it's the AQI and everything. Of course, it is there. People deal with it, unfortunately. But to hear things कि मोदी जी तो अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं is like how long will you just work through your gritted teeth?
That
absolutely. Like if that's why I said like if we were a part of that space, but like I wanted to make that connection to Tarak Mehta ka Ulta Chashma ka society. If we had that mentality, right? वो gated society वाला तो move करने में problem नहीं था. If we were also a part of that demography जो US आके भी सिर्फ देसी ही बने रहते हैं, जो पटेल ब्रदर्स में ही शॉपिंग करके वापस घर में आके वैसे ही बनते हैं, एंड दे नेवर गो आउट टू लाइक एक्सप्लोर द डिफरेंट कल्चर. So then I would not have had that problem to go back to that gated society back in India.
Just from
But-
what I've seen, they are just as reticent to go back to India as anybody else.
Yeah, उनका वो AQI वाला problem है.
Fair enough.
recently here, I met a family that immigrated here just a couple of years ago, and uncle is definitely much older than me. And they invited us for dinner, and I unfortunately had to go. And uncle starts talking about how things are great in India. And I was very tired. I was like, this is too late in the day for me to give a shit about your feelings. I was just like, on what basis? On what metrics? And we had that typical argument. It's like, this is not what you consider development is not development. Like, you're stupid, basically, at the end of the day. And I could choose not to meet him again. That's the difference. Like, you can actually dissociate yourself from these kinds of people who annoy you. But in India, you'll be faced with them day in and day out. And that's why I said I would need to change my career, because I don't think I would be able to do like a regular corporate job in India. It's just
Two more things on this. One is after COVID, a lot of like at least people I know who live in like Pune, Bangalore, these kind of places, live in big high rises. They would find their chowkidar bhaiya, and the chowkidar bhaiya will do puri building ka grocery, which means that every week or whenever you give your entire grocery list to this chowkidar bhaiya and in the building WhatsApp group, which also means that you're that much more careful about how much chicken or alcohol you're ordering. ठीक है? दूसरा, one of my closest friends who lives in Pune and is like us in terms of like center left and all that, said to me that जब वो हो रहा था, याद है वो ताली बजाओ थाली बजाओ, right? He was like कि यार
Yeah.
अगर मैंने अपने घर में दिया नहीं जलाया तो they will like I will be the only apartment in the whole like building that doesn't do it, and I cannot mark myself like that.
Well,
I'm very disappointed. तुम लोग सूट वूट में क्यों नहीं हो, टाई वाई में? हाँ, हम हुडी पहने वो तो चलता है. हम तो ऑफिस भी ऐसे ही जाते हैं.
वेस्टर्न एकेडेमिया है, ठीक है. मेरी एडवाइजर मतलब उनका उनका यूनिफॉर्म है शॉर्ट्स एंड लाइक अ कूल लिंग्विस्टिक्स ग्राफिक टी. मैंने आज तक उनको फॉर्मल वेयर में देखा ही नहीं
And that
क्या बात
professor, Noam Chomsky.
है. वेल, नोम साहिब तो
अभी तो ब्राजील में है ना.
अरे 2019 में दिखे थे मुझे. मैं से बिल्डिंग से बाहर निकल रही थी तो like, सामने ये इतना धीरे धीरे कौन चल रहा है. एंड देन इट dawned on me कि कौन चल रहा है.
Were you here?
इसने बीच में ये बुड्ढे बाजू, ये बुड्ढे
Were
बाजू.
you here or was he there?
So he's a professor laureate. क्योंकि वो इतने ग्रेट हैं, they had to create a position for him because emeritus is not enough for the Noam Chomsky. So he became professor laureate.
So basically, he left Boston because he was getting old and it was cold,
Yeah.
so he moved
Snowbird.
there. Actually, one of the things जो शायद वत्सल और मेघ से ही आंसर कर पाएंगे वो ये है कि we all have a way to kind of look at our lives, right? Whatever is happening in our lives around us, whatever, right? I believe कि ऐसे PhD या you know when you kind of give your life to some kind of research, it is so all encompassing in your life that it might just kind of seep into other areas in your life. So like does this happen that like even like an ordinary day-to-day, I don't know, something you guys end up like connecting it to some of the research work that you guys are doing or something?
I was thinking of
So,
a completely different tangent. Like in my case, the toxicity seeps over for sure.
I just have one question. Part 1 में क्या की like since I'm
Yes.
joining midway, कोई fill in कर दो मुझे.
So we
Please.
mostly talked about grad school experience for each of us, how we found
Okay.
our careers and the city that we grew up in. What was it like to grow up there? And
वो सिटी मैंने कवर कर ली निशान,
क्या?
don't worry. सिटी मैंने कवर कर ली है.
ओह अच्छा सिटी. अच्छा तूने वो वाली बैचलर्स वाली सिटी कवर. नहीं अपने बैचलर्स वाली सिटी
नहीं.
अलग थी लेकिन.
नहीं घर की the city grew up in basically.
Raj, in your case, we talked about how it was to be a Bengali in Madhya Pradesh. With Nishant, we have
No,
like
but
we have a
also
different.
different क्या मतलब. But to be fair, Raj was literally growing up in Ayodhya of Jabalpur. मैं फिर भी थोड़ा सा.
But
अयोध्या और जबलपुर.
I think निशांत के लिए क्वेश्चन ये हुआ कि how difficult was it to grow up as a Srivastav in Jabalpur?
The struggle.
Must
How
have been a really
Most-
uniquely.
वो मतलब जो सबसे प्रताड़ित प्रजाति होती है ना, घर का बड़ा लड़का, अपर कास्ट, वो सब हूँ मैं. कि सोचता ही नहीं कोई मेरे बारे में.
आपके
हाँ.
पापा को कॉफी विद करण में नहीं बुलाया ना?
सर आप गलत पॉडकास्ट में आ गए. बियर बाइसेप नाम
अरे
का पॉडकास्ट
मेरी
है, वहाँ
आइसक्रीम
जाइए.
छीन छीन के मेरी बहन को दे देते थे यार. ऐसा करते थे मेरे साथ. ऐसा थोड़ी.
Has feminism gone too far?
Yes.
No, this is Rakhi system gone too far. राखी बंधवा दो तो your property becomes our property.
अरे बाप रे.
वैसे you have a sister too, right, Vatsal?
Yes,
So
I do.
अरे
Me
वाह,
too.
अरे
How
वाह,
about your
अरे वाह.
sisters, bro?
All elder sisters?
I have a brother.
Are you?
Young
अरे
girl.
वाह,
I'm an
अरे
elder
वाह,
sister.
देखो देखो.
Oh,
बहुत स्ट्रेस लेते हैं.
So are we all elders?
Raj, you have a younger sister? अच्छा.
Yeah.
yeah, same.
Vatsal, you are.
We are
younger.
elders.
नहीं, I have a younger
सब बड़े
sister.
भैया दीदी.
What about you?
I am an only child.
That is also a pattern.
I know. I have all the traits.
सब पैटर्न है तो पैटर्न से बाहर क्या है?
ये हमारे behaviors में भी फर्क है ना, like मैं.
Sorry. ऐसा नहीं करना चाहिए. मुझे मुंह में खाना लेकर नहीं बोलना चाहिए.
ASMR चल रहा है यहाँ तो. नहीं please.
But सुबह से मैं कुछ खाया नहीं हूँ यार. Sorry. It's been that kind of a day. Like Aditya is a single child, right? So BJPod maybe, like if you look at it, it's like that.
Does he annoy you more than Nishant annoys you?
मैं कहाँ annoy करता हूँ यार.
Does he annoy?
क्योंकि वो only children का एक कुछ होता है कि brain अलग काम करता है. Sorry.
He's different though. I mean, I don't know कि ये podcast
नहीं
में
क्यों
ये
नहीं
discuss करना चाहिए,
नहीं. आदित्य
my-
ना
नहीं,
सही
और
आदित्य
बुला
के
लो,
बारे में
और
तो बात ही
बुलाओ.
कर सकते हैं.
but-
Might inspire him to come back.
मतलब he's obviously he's like when he's there he's 100% there, but if he's not, nobody knows where he is or how his
हाँ that ये तो है. Yeah.
and that like I'm honestly like ये
बोलो, बोलो.
therapy सुन लो फिर मेरी, like with BJPod, right? One of the things that I have a bit of a struggle with is to try and maintain a consistency. Like Nishant and I both being I don't know if it is because we are elders, I don't know, but we are much more available and can prioritize and deprioritize things compared to
बेसिकली
him.
कुछ करने का है नहीं ज्यादा.
जो भी जैसे भी देखो उस चीज को उसका तो लाइक ऑल ऑफ आवर एपिसोड प्लानिंग हैपेंस अराउंड हिम
Yeah.
बेसिकली. वो जब अवेलेबल है उसका जब टाइम है लाइक एवरीथिंग हैपेंस अराउंड हिम. तो आई डोंट नो इफ दैट्स समथिंग दैट यू गाइस हैव
I
एक्सपीरियंस्ड
guess
विद
we
योर
just
पोड Vatsal.
replaced
Yeah,
Aditya
sure.
with guests,
Yeah.
and that way there's like less toxicity.
हम लोग को yeah, we had to find a way around
Because
it.
each time it's a different person.
नहीं वैसे टू बी फेयर लास्ट 2-3 वीक्स में एक बार मैंने डिच किया है.
हाँ अभी उसने
मतलब
recent-
कुछ होने
but-
लगा है बिकॉज या आई गॉट बिजी
but that's rare
usually
still.
Hmm.
हाँ उसके कंपैरिजन में कुछ भी नहीं है भाई. एंड टू हिम एटलीस्ट आई वाज रिप्लाइंग कि ओके आई एम ट्राइंग बट आई कैन नॉट कम. बोथ तो देन इफ ही इज गॉन देन ही इज गॉन. मैसेज भी भूल जाओ. रिप्लाई कुछ
देखिए
नहीं.
मुझे बहुत आश्चर्य होता है कि वो अभी तक फुल प्रोफेसर बने नहीं, क्योंकि ट्रेड्स तो सारे
लक्षण
हैं,
पूरे हैं.
राइट.
हाँ.
He's just like वो कस्प हो ना, वो बस रिटायरमेंट के 3 साल पहले वाला
Yeah.
रैप करना है, निकलना है. आई एम ओवर दिस.
बच्चे लगे पड़े हैं कि सर थीसिस में साइन कर दीजिए, सर कुछ कर दीजिए, सर लेटर भेज दीजिए. वहां सर
सर
नहीं
इज
नहीं
सर टॉक दे रहे हैं दूसरे
हाँ.
यूरोप में
सर सबैटिकल पे चले गए,
बिना बताए.
बताए नहीं.
हमारे यहाँ एक बहुत ये था, आई डोंट नो इफ दिस इज अक्रॉस ऑल यूनिवर्सिटीज, आई बेट इट वुड बी, कि प्रोफेसर दैट इज ऑन टेन्योर ट्रैक versus someone who's achieved like working for them is like chalk and cheese. Even before and after, the same person is completely different.
या या
टेन्योर ट्रैक मतलब क्या सरकारी
हाँ,
नौकरी
हाँ.
होगी ना.
और क्या.
हाँ
Yes,
या टेन्योर
yes.
मतलब सरकारी नौकरी.
There's nothing left to prove, then you do
It
what you
can go
want.
both ways, by the way.
Yeah,
मैंने देखा
it
है.
doesn't happen to a lot of women, for example, like based on like whatever data has been collected. It seems that professors who are women, queer, BIPOC tend to continue to work just as hard, क्योंकि imposter syndrome जाने में थोड़ा ज्यादा time लगता है.
No, so one of our professors, she's like Chinese and a woman, so she would still continue to come into the lab at the same times. Like she would leave at 2:30 a.m.,
That
come
might
back
be
at
just
11 a.m., do the same thing, but would smile a little
the
bit more.
love of research.
You know,
ना.
was a little bit more relaxed and yelled at
Nice.
people less.
But they still have to constantly publish, right? Publish और perish क्यों कहते हैं भाई
Because
लोगों में?
until you are tenured, that is true.
अच्छा.
मतलब once you get the tenure, तुम कुछ भी करो, बाढ़ में जाओ.
अगर
मतलब
इसको
एक
देन यू बिकम द पब्लिशर.
नहीं मतलब तुम 10 साल में एक भी पब्लिश करो तब भी कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. तुम रिव्यू भी मत करो.
then
हाँ,
all the
yeah.
pressure to publish goes on your students, and you're just there to edit, revise,
That's
guide.
what. No, the students don't have tenure.
No, but then what happens to all the feedback जो every semester के अंत में हमसे लिया जाता था? मान लो कि नहीं पसंद आया कोई, तो उसका होता क्या है?
It depends on every university ना, क्या कैसे वो हैंडल करते हैं. मोस्टली होता क्या है कि उनको एक डॉक्यूमेंट चला जाता है पीडीएफ में कि देखिए सर थोड़ा आपका ना थोड़ा अच्छा नहीं आ रहा है, अगले सेमेस्टर में देख लीजिएगा. बढ़ा तो बस दैट्स द एक्सटेंट ऑफ इट. मेरी यूनिवर्सिटी में I've seen people that have been reported for abuse and क्या
अरे
क्या
बाप
तो नहीं हुआ है उनके
कितने
साथ.
मिलियन का ग्रांट लेके आए? अब्यूज क्या बात
कोई
है?
he did not have a grant. उसके
तो
पास एक ग्रांट था which has मतलब वो 7 years का ग्रांट मिलता. It was like I think 7 millions for 7 years. तो he thought he was the मतलब king of the world, which technically वो बोल सकता है because he can do
बल्ली बल्ली
anything.
बाहु
कुछ नहीं होगा. एंड उसमें मतलब अब्यूज उसकी पूरी लैब ने pretty much like almost everybody left except research associate because probably उसके साथ उसका कुछ चल रहा था.
H1B भी वीजा प्रॉब्लम भी हो सकता है ना. हम लोग ज्यादा इतना स्पेकुलेट क्यों करें?
नहीं दे आर Canadians ना,
मैं तेरे को
तो
आउट दे रही
H1B
थी
क्या.
यार.
But basically even after all of that all he got was a मतलब ऐसे डीन के ऑफिस में बुलाया उसको कि बात करनी है.
हाथ खड़े
That's what I know. नहीं कुछ वो भी नहीं. वो डीन के साथ कॉफी पी और डीन ने बोला अरे भाई ऐसा मत किया कर यार, जा. हो गया बस इतना.
कुछ होता नहीं है as far as like I've heard from even other people. So I think in part one I told a story about all the guys who got caught for plagiarism, right? So of course at the end of the semester they gave a bad review
Yeah.
to their professor, really severely bad review, and he was pulled up in front of the dean. No, ye kya chal raha hai? So he gave this background, and he used that to be racist
Yeah.
towards other Indian students from the next semester
Yeah.
onwards, which that's how we continue the cycle.
But tenure wali baat pe na, like there are people who get tenure and then become good people. Like where basically they improve their personality, because tenure, getting to that like milestone, is so difficult कि then they are grade A assholes. Once they get there and like अब तो हो गया सब, तो आओ बेटा चलो रिसर्च करते हैं, मस्ती करते हैं, पेपर नहीं छप रहा कोई बात नहीं, अगले साल हो जाएगा। ऐसे मतलब जो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस भी देखे हैं मैंने। आवाज
मैंने
नहीं आ
अभी
रही
एक
है
रियलाइज
अनुराग?
किया, थोड़ा सा रैंडम बोल
नहीं
रहा
आ
हूँ।
रही आ रही है
अब
आ रही है यार, मुझे तो आ रही है।
मैंने अभी जस्ट एक चीज रियलाइज करी, ऐसे ऐसे बात करते हुए, आई जस्ट रियलाइज दैट, सो आई वेंट टू द बिजनेस स्कूल, राइट? आई लिटरली 36 क्रेडिट आवर्स, नो वुमेन प्रोफेसर, नन। जस्ट रियलाइज इट राइट
Weird.
नाउ, इज सो मच सो कि अभी मैं म्यूट करके ट्रांसक्रिप्ट चेक कर रहा था पूरा।
स्टूडेंट
I-
पॉपुलेशन पूरी देसी, फैकल्टी प्रोफाइल
हाँ।
पूरा मेल, वाह! ले तो मतलब
हाँ।
भगवान ने बना दी जोड़ी वही, मतलब
वो तो मैं कह रहा हूँ ना, इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम्स इज बेसिकली H1 पाने का
अरे
तरीका। अभी देखो क्या होता है उस पे।
बिजनेस स्कूल में, हाँ मतलब आई तो डिडंट गो टू बिजनेस स्कूल, बट इंजीनियरिंग के हिसाब से इवन द स्टूडेंट्स, आई थिंक जो मैंने मास्टर्स में 2 मैथ के कोर्सेज लिए थे, बोथ वर वुमेन प्रोफेसर्स, अदर देन दैट ऑल वर मेल, बट अगेन आई डिड माय मास्टर्स इन मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग, तो वो भी एक है बैरियर।
MIS का गॉसिप था, आई थिंक कपल ऑफ वीक्स अगो आई वाज एट अ पार्टी विद देयर एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव, जो ग्रांट्स वगैरह का पैसा मैनेज करते हैं, रिइंबर्समेंट्स, द कोऑर्डिनेटर फॉर ऑल द फाइनेंशियल स्टफ, राइट? तो वी गॉट टॉकिंग कि आप कहाँ कहाँ का काम किया है एंड ऑल, एंड शी इज ग्रेट। फिर थोड़ी देर बाद बात आई कि हमारे यूनिवर्सिटी का जो मैनेजमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम्स और बिजनेस स्कूल
वो भी तो
जो
फेमस
है,
है।
वहां पे जब उन्होंने, हाँ वहां पर जब उन्होंने काम किया तो हाउ वाज द एक्सपीरियंस? एंड शी इज लाइक, हाँ, स्टूडेंट्स वुड स्टैंड इन रैंडम कॉर्नर्स एंड बी टॉकिंग टू देमसेल्व्स because they are preparing for things, and everybody is there to just get the bare minimum that they can and leave. And there was someone who was in a PhD program in MIS, whom I got talking with. I think we had joined the university around the same time, and I was asking about graduation date. एंड दे उनका मतलब जो एक प्रिलिमिनरी स्टेप जो होता है वो भी उन्होंने क्रॉस नहीं किया। एंड दे वर लाइक, हाँ मैंने अपना प्रीलिम तो नहीं दिया है, कॉम्प्स मेरे हुए नहीं है, बट मैं अगले साल ग्रेजुएट कर दूंगा। सो दिस गाय, लाइक मेरे लिए, लाइक कॉम्प्स से लाइक डिसर्टेशन तक पहुंचने में 3 साल लगे, एंड आई थिंक वत्सल इट मस्ट हैव टेकन यू अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ टाइम एज वेल, राइट? इनका ऐसा गेम्ड सिस्टम है, 1 साल में, लाइक विद इन 6 months ही बिकेम अ PhD कैंडिडेट एंड ही गॉट हिज डिग्री।
यार ये मुझे पता होता तो मैं
Degree
भी करने की
also?
कोशिश करता फिर।
हाँ,
एक सेकंड, डिग्री एज इन लाइक
his PhD.
मास्टर्स या
No, his PhD. He
How can you
PhD.
get PhD
Okay.
this, like मुझे like offline में like make me meet
ऐसे
them।
ये मिल रही है तो फिर
हाँ,
मैं भी ले
मैं भी
लूंगा
ले
फिर।
ये उससे पहले 3 साल जो उसकी जो अपना वो कोर्स वर्क कर रहा था, he was working on all the things that he needed to get done for his PhD, and then you know your department evaluates you, are you qualified to be called a PhD student या तुमको मास्टर आउट करके निकाल दे सिस्टम से। तो उसने वो 2 माइलस्टोन्स एक ही साल में क्लियर करे, which is unheard of.
अच्छा, एक क्वेश्चन है, लाइक इफ यू समहाउ स्ट्रीमलाइन एंड मेक इट लीन एज मच एज पॉसिबल, तो फिर भी मिनिमम कितना टाइम लगेगा?
4 साल।
like if everything is, हाँ मतलब वही पूछ रहा हूँ मैं, I don't know, because 5 years is what I've
For
heard,
a PhD?
but what I'm saying is कि इस
Yeah.
5 years में कितना ऐसा क्या क्या हटाया जा सकता है sort of,
So basically like how quickly can like
Yeah.
if you can
and I'm not talking about कि कुछ research में घपला कर दो, नहीं, I'm just talking about all the random
नहीं,
things
I see what you mean.
which can, yeah.
So one thing, कोर्स वर्क कम किया जा सकता है, दैट वुड बी ग्रेट। जो लोग मास्टर्स करके आते हैं, हमको फिर भी मिनिमम लेवल ऑफ क्रेडिट्स लेने होते हैं, और हमारे क्रेडिट्स ट्रांसफर नहीं होते अगर आप बाहर के देश से हो।
Okay.
So you end up spending like 3 years of your time relearning everything from scratch. Not true for everybody, but in the UK and European PhD system, for example, you just join, you work on a grant, you do research, you get your PhD, तो उनका 3 साल में हो जाता है।
Okay.
पर हमको अप्रेंटिसशिप मॉडल है तो हमको 5 साल लगते हैं, बिकॉज वी हैव टू लर्न
2
एवरीथिंग फ्रॉम
years of
स्क्रैच।
masters sort of repeat हो जाता है, okay, so 3 years, 3 years is, I guess, that system is okay, good.
But that is also very, very, very like personal to
Restrictive.
every, and restrictive
Yeah.
also. मतलब in terms of PhD, because यस मतलब फ्रांस में अगर आप पीएचडी कर रहे हो तो देयर इज अ सिस्टम कि आपको द प्रॉब्लम इज गिवन टू यू एंड देन यू वर्क ऑन इट फ्रॉम डे वन, जो भी कोर्सेज लेते हो दैट इज अपार्ट, बट 3 years यू हैव टू फिनिश, दैट इज द मतलब उनका मॉडल वो है. But then in North America, even in many European or Asian countries, I mean, it's not like that, right? So you are given the task of finding out the problem statement and then starting working on the project, all of that. ठीक है?
But you do see more research output from, say, US.
Of
Many
course,
times
yeah.
more,
You
right?
you do.
Compared to Europe, only because we get exploited in very different ways than people there do.
Yeah.
We work way more hours than an average PhD candidate from the Europe is expected to do. हमारी छुट्टियां नहीं है, हमको हमको 9 महीने के पैसे मिलते हैं, उनको 1 साल का मिलता है, which means वो 3 महीना कवर करने के लिए we have to scrape a lot more, and there is no off and on for us, but they have actual rights.
इंडिया में तो पता नहीं, you all remember that जसपाल भट्टी episode about PhD?
Yes.
तो
yes.
मैंने अपनी फैमिली में, अपनी खुद की क्लोज फैमिली में वो दोनों कैरेक्टर्स देखे, the asshole professor as well as the exploited student.
I would say qualitatively कोई फर्क नहीं है. Like any of the linguists that I meet who did their PhD in India, who work in India, I would say many of them are qualitatively even more hardworking and even better than me. It's just that they have to deal with a lot of systemic stuff to get the same things done. मेरे को 1 महीने में 30 दिन में अगर कोई हार्डवेयर या सॉफ्टवेयर का प्रॉब्लम है, 30 days में ग्रांट गेट्स थ्रू एंड I'll have the computer in hand. वही कंप्यूटर इंडिया में जब मुझे अपने लैब में सेटअप करने के लिए, तो 6 months it took for the tender process to get initiated and go through, and that was 6 months of no research output. मेरे पैसे भी they didn't give me 2 महीने की सैलरी उन्होंने कभी क्लियर करी ही नहीं. So at least वो सब तो नहीं है.
Yeah.
If you're doing a PhD from a private institute, even then, is it the same? Or उसमें एटलीस्ट टेंडर वेंडर तो नहीं होता होगा.
अभी ये प्राइवेट यूनिवर्सिटीज का सिस्टम तो अभी शुरू हुआ है, तो आई थिंक इट विल बी सम टाइम बिफोर.
एंड आल्सो आई डोंट नो व्हाट्स द perceived value of those as well. Yeah.
तो मतलब when you find your PhD का problem ना, तो depending on what you're trying to study also, it might take you long enough to answer your own questions, and then you can never, the problem is ज़्यादातर जो लोग PhD करते हैं ना, they do it because they like finding out things, and then it becomes very difficult to say कि this is enough, अभी चलो लिख देते हैं thesis, let's just like you get to one point and then it's like अभी और करना है, अभी और करना है, अभी ये भी करना है, ये पेपर भी पब्लिश करना है, questions never stop, so then you have to, how do you put a मतलब ऐसे एक streamline करके कि this is where you have to stop. Definition wise, what is a PhD? Nobody knows, right? It's just like when you have made enough contribution to your field of subject, then you can be awarded a PhD. तो like how do you define that कि 1 साल में होगा या 5 साल में या 6 साल में? तो it is very, that's what I was saying कि it is very very personal to every research project.
Yeah, factory line create करना बहुत मुश्किल है. They try a lot. They take away our funding after 4 years, and they're like.
And the problem is कि like most of the best of the discoveries come when you don't have this stress of कि अभी खत्म करना है यार. Like, you know, I don't know, I feel like when you have the independence to just think about something without worrying कि यार अभी 2 साल में खत्म करना है, sometimes the best discoveries come out of those moments. It might be different for others. Yeah.
Speaking of worrying, साल बदला, सरकार बदली. So are all of you, besides Vatsal, whose problems are going to come later in the year, how are all of you?
मैं सोच रहा था
बात तो तुम्हारी पार्लियामेंट, हाँ, तुम्हारा जब सिस्टम होगा तब देखेंगे. बाकी सबका कैसे चल रहा है भाई? I mean, how are all of you doing in the wake of the H1B drama?
Well, personally and principally, there are two different views.
मतलब the drama doesn't actually even exist if I'm not on Twitter. Basically, it is a function of where I live. But
कुछ तो होगा. There will be something that will happen. I don't know.
No, वो जब होगा. अभी तक जो हो रहा है, that all that whatever we have seen, I have only seen it online.
Yeah. This is correct. Most of it is online, and the people who are very online are actually very affected by this.
Yeah.
I actually met somebody during New Year's who was like, he's Indian and he's literally afraid to go out because he's like, I don't know, like people are perceiving us like this, and this has changed. My entire worldview has changed. And I'm like, listen, app बंद कर, बाहर जा,
Yeah.
थोड़ा देख वेख इधर उधर,
मेरा
and it's not the same.
क्योंकि मैं नए जॉब में जा रहा हूँ तो मेरा LCA फाइल हो रहा है और फिर उसके बाद H1 का पिटिशन पड़ेगा जो कि आज 15 जनवरी है, 20 जनवरी को ट्रम्प आ जाएगा। तो मोस्ट लाइकली मेरा H1 पिटिशन जब जाएगा तो वो ट्रम्प
Admin.
के हाँ उसमें रहेगा, which is I don't expect anything to be that different. However,
Yeah, obviously there is a non-zero chance that something very drastic might happen. It will be, matlab, 1 in a million types, or maybe even worse odds हैं उसके, because it just won't work.
हाँ नहीं logistically like it will be
मतलब
difficult.
हाँ, it just forget about कि companies क्या चाहती हैं, just logistically इतने सारे लोग हैं कि it just won't work. वो फिर 4 साल एक यही होता रहेगा.
So in 2017, end of 2017 मैं इंडिया गया था स्टैंपिंग कराने, दैट वाज ट्रम्प्स फर्स्ट ईयर। तब मुझे 221G लग गया था और तब बहुत सारे लोगों को लगा था, एंड इट टुक लाइक आई हैड टू टेक 2 months अनपेड लीव एंड ऑल दैट। सो वो उसका मेरे को स्कार है अभी भी। बट उसके अलावा जो निशांत ने बोला राइट कि इन टर्म्स ऑफ द लॉजिस्टिक्स ऑफ इट, लाइक देयर आर सो मेनी पीपल ऑन इट, you cannot just suddenly, it will be very tough to suddenly ask, say, a Meta, for example, to.
Yeah.
So I think what will happen is the scrutiny will increase.
Amazon, Meta, everything.
What will happen is a slow drip of things. For example, they will put like a salary cap thing based on cities. I think the most affected with all this will be the kids who are graduating right now, because when I was graduating, as Megh has talked about, right, everybody from every Desi from my batch, which was a lot of people, got into H1 right, like got into the OPT and then H1 right off the bat.
You graduated in
13 summer.
2013, huh? So
summer.
Okay, so I graduated in 2011. And I know that when my H1B was applied, that was the last year I heard from no one that theirs was not picked in the lottery thing. So I was that last जो शायद उस समय cap के अंदर ही आ गए थे सब, whatever.
Before we go further ahead, मतलब a lot of our listeners are from India or other countries. They might not know, like for me example, I'm not from US. So can you please tell us what is H1B? What is the process? What is the controversy?
221G.
Very briefly.
I mean,
221G मेरा experience कभी नहीं रहा है, fortunately. So
अच्छा 221G भी बोल दिया मैंने randomly, sorry.
कोई बात नहीं, ऐसे होता है.
What is 221G?
So F1 बताते हैं, H1 बताते हैं. So F1, generally people who come and study for their masters, they come on an F1 visa. There is a student visa. उसके बाद फिर once you are graduated, you're about to graduate, you get this thing called an OPT, which is optional practical training. So you can work for a year, and then if you're working in a STEM field, you can extend that to 1.5 years more.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to stay further and work further within the US, you need to take something called an H1B, which I think is a specialty visa.
Yeah.
So it's a specialty visa. It's for a temporary worker. Actually, is it really a temporary worker? It's a temporary visa. It's a non-immigrant.
It is
for 6 years only.
It is dual intent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dual intent doesn't kick in until 40, right?
Yeah. So it is a non-immigrant intent visa. So you can work here full time and you get it for a maximum of 6 years. Now you can also, you don't need to go through the master's route. You can come here directly for work and you directly get an H1B visa if you want, or an L1 visa, which I'm less familiar with because by the time I worked in this industry, they were not as common anymore. They last for 6 years. After that, if you want to stay in the country, you have to file for an immigrant petition, and that requires you to file for your green card. And I think there's a form I-140 that gets approved, which shows that yes, you're technically approved to get your green card, but you have to wait in line so that one is available to be given to you.
So
Is
so
this the
wait in
perm
line.
So you
process?
इसमें भी एक वो है हाँ, so
That's the perm process.
that's the perm process. But so once your I-140 is approved, then you basically get your H-1B gets renewed every 3 years.
Indefinitely till
And
you get a
you,
green
I
card.
mean, it goes through the whole application process, but that 6-year barrier is not there. But you are still tied to your job, so you need a job still.
Yeah, I think but the subject is like such that it will, no matter how we try to explain it, it will be confusing to whoever has no idea.
The main thing is there is this existential dread. Whether you are in line, not in line, you're still a student, you are married to somebody who is in line, जो भी है, एक pit of the stomach में एक darkness होता है. And you just keep praying to God that someday that darkness lessens or goes away. That's, I think, overall, जिससे बात किया है, मुझे वो लगता है कि हाँ, सबके पेट में पत्थर है, बस हम वो लेके चलते रहते हैं, and then at some point,
Not really.
But
You
I
don't think
know,
about it so much.
so basically, like quickly, मैं ये कहना
It
or
चाहता
maybe
depends
this
on
is
the
a
individual,
generational
actually.
difference. Maybe because I came in 2019, आप लोग, मतलब, you were there to see a different time.
Same time, yeah.
So basically, the thing is कि depend करता है कि how worried you are about it.
Exactly.
Right? I think the stress fundamentally is about your visa is always tied to a job or whoever is sponsoring you, right? That is there, and that makes it slightly difficult if you're looking for new rules and stuff. To like, you have to first figure out if they sponsor, blah blah blah, all of that, right? And something that I'm noticing
ये
is
किताबों की बरसात हो रही है.
sorry मेरा हाथ लग
वाह
गया.
वाह.
2013 में सबको मिल गया था, क्योंकि अभी मैं ये नोटिस कर रहा हूँ कि a lot of organizations that used to sponsor H1 visa do not do anymore, and that number is reducing every year. So that is already happening. Kids who are coming in now already are facing those challenges. The second thing is ki, so that's there. Now about something that Richa said, I-140, right? A lot of Indians have a difficult time with that perm process because US ka immigration system is not like, say, Canada, which is merit, however you want to define merit, like the way Canada defines it, that basic points and all of that. US allows X number of permanent residency applications to be approved every year. And X number is divided into all the countries equally. So someone coming in from Nigeria, and I don't know if the exact numbers, but let's assume it's 7,000. So Nigeria has 7,000 applications granted, and so does India. Or Indians, rather, are much more in number on H1 visa, for example. So every year, a certain number of Indians go into the backlog. And they are then processed the year after, which keeps increasing the backlog. So for example, Nishant and Mera, jo I-140 ka approval date है वो मार्च 2018, ठीक है. मार्च 2018 में हम लोग का पर्म फाइल हो गया था. अभी 2025 है, और अभी इंडियंस जो हमारी कैटेगरी में है उनका 2012 अक्टूबर का क्लियर हो रहा है. तो लेकिन अब इसीलिए मैं कह कि पर्सनल लेवल पे if I get a green card, life will be much easier. You can do a lot of things, right? On a principle, I really appreciate this system versus, say, the Canadian system. Personally, I have a problem with looking at people as only the value that they are providing and value as you define in that moment in time, and not, as full humans. And that's why, like, although like a lot of people move to Canada and talk about like how the Canadian system is better, and maybe personally it is, and maybe it will be great for me to be able to, last part मैंने कहा है कि I would much rather live in the West than India. So, but I, for one, really appreciate the way the US system is, although it hurts me. And the whole current controversy is basically around this. Because what is happening is, because so many Indians get into this green card backlog, people like us, who हम लोग का 6 साल जो था, इसका मुझसे 1 साल पहले, पर टेक्निकली मेरे 6 साल 2019 में खत्म हो गया. उसके बाद से मैं इंडेफिनिट एक्सटेंशंस पे जा रहा हूँ. तो अगर तुम आज लिस्ट उठा के देख लो, people on H1, you will see 75% are Indians. The reason is not because most Indians are dominated, मतलब they are, but like it's not just the only reason. The reason is that so many are in backlog. So because they are in backlog, they constantly have to renew their H1, and it seems like the list is filled with Indians. तो डिस्कशन ऐसा हुआ कि क्या, और चल ये भी कई साल से चल रहा है कि क्या ये कंट्री कैप्स हटा देने चाहिए, क्या इंस्टेड ऑफ नाइजीरिया गेटिंग 7,000 वी शुड हैव फर्स्ट इन फर्स्ट आउट सिस्टम इन द यूएस for this backlog.
Oh, I don't think the white people would like
And
that.
Exactly, because if they do, then it will be filled with mostly Indians and then Mexicans and Chinese to a degree. And
But
that kind of defeats the purpose of the whole immigration, US का जो idea, give me your like.
yeah. No, I also agree with this system. मतलब first of all, ये dread जो है वो individual उसका है. And honestly, I am at a point in my life where it doesn't even register to me now. Like, I have just too many things to do in my life. So it just होता रहेगा, देखा जाएगा. मतलब also जिसको dread है भी, मैं तो I don't know the exact number, but how many people actually have had to leave because of that, or I don't know. My suspicion is that it's very
some people have voluntarily left. इंडिया में जितना भी अभी स्टार्टअप का
हाँ
कल्चर है,
voluntarily वाला है, but
80%
तो that's वो यहीं से no, but what I'm saying is कि
ऐसे H1 भी जाते हैं और वो कॉपी करके क्रिएट कर रहे हैं.
मैं बस ये देखा है, and my observation is that people are still here. like कितने ही तुम इतना रो रहे हो, लेकिन क्या फर्क तुम्हें कुछ फर्क एक्चुअली नहीं
Especially
पड़ रहा है.
Desis figure out. Just to give you guys a quick example, as Richa said, after you graduate, you get on OPT, and within that 1 year of OPT, someone has to file an H1 for you, and you get into that lottery. And if you get through the lottery, then you get the H1 visa.
Yeah.
Of course, many people now do not get through the lottery.
Enroll in a
What do Indians
master's.
do? Now there are other Indians who have opened universities, private universities, especially like I used to live in the Bay Area, right, San Francisco. There are universities that have zero educational value.
Basically, they're a hook.
They are just
OPT on day
free.
one, so you're still on F1, and you just you can work.
Yeah, so you can
to be
keep
fair,
working,
there were
and you have
universities that
OPT.
were caught in
So-
the scam. I think 2018 या 19 की बात है, when specifically California में ही हुआ था. They were caught for
Yeah, you're right.
F1 scam, and it was someone I think from Andhra Pradesh spearheading the.
Of course.
Owned and operated by Andhra Pradesh people. Then there is the second way. The second way is there are people, most of those that I have met are somehow from Andhra, but I don't know to generalize, but there are consultancies that are companies which basically hire you as an employee and give you an H1 visa and then make you a contract worker with other companies. Now, when they talk about H1 abuse, this is
they
H1
are
abuse. क्योंकि क्या
granting you
होता
visa
है?
based. So इसमें भी they already have a salary cap, by the way, that you need to pay someone a minimum amount before applying for their
135
H1B.
to 155K, right? Or something like
No,
an
I don't
insane
think
amount.
No.
Depending on
Didn't it
It-
didn't
yeah,
it go up
it
like
depends
many
on a
times?
the
lot.
role and
Okay.
city and all
It
of it.
might have, but I don't think it's that high. But anyway, so what they will
There
do
was a
is
threat.
that but that number is what they charge whoever they are basically supplying the workforce to, and you get even half of it, maybe. Yeah.
So if I want an H1 visa, for example, there is another thing that is happening. So for example, when I was laid off, there was an option for me to go and get this H1 visa. But what would that mean is I will pay them, and then they will cut a percentage, and then they will reroute that money back to me as my salary, and I will maintain my H1 that way. ठीक है? और इसमें एक और घपला होता है, वो ये है, I literally know people who like in India did B Pharma, then came here, joined up with this consultancy. These consultancy also train you, okay? So what they do is they teach you a language, coding language, and then they put you as QA tester or some sort of role, and then fudge your resume. Instead of telling you B Pharma, they tell you your 7 years of experience with some
ठीक है,
Indian
एक
company
पर्सनल
और होता है.
एनेक्डोट देना है मुझे, बट हाँ, go on.
And then you get on H1. नहीं, मैं बता तो like H1 abuse हो रहा है, और ये तो मैं कह रहा हूँ, ये तो मतलब सबसे घटिया लेवल का अब्यूज हो रहा है, जो शायद if they are serious they can stop it tomorrow. But then
Cognizant.
Infosys, TCS, Capgemini, Cognizant, all of these companies are also not different. They are essentially also doing what is the whole Infosys business model is. One is that they provide technical support
HCL.
around like software
Hmm.
with their India offices. अभी नाम लेना चाहिए कि नहीं अमेरिकन कंपनी का, but there's this famous sports American company, rhymes with Kiki. So they don't do H1Bs. They don't really do H1Bs unless exceptional case. But the catch is they have Cognizant as their vendor, and Cognizant provides them staff, contractors that do so that way they don't have to show
Yeah.
that they do any H1, but they
अरे
have like
Cognizant is a
now
legit
people.
company at least.
So ये
ठीक है,
बहुत सारा चलता
मेरा
है.
anecdote तो ये है कि when I completed my masters, so at one point it started getting desperate कि भाई कोई इंटरव्यू कॉल तो आ जाए, कुछ तो हो जाए टाइप्स. So जो जहां भी मिल रहा था लिंक्डइन पे कुछ भी दिखा डाल दिया या अप्लाई कर दिया, एंड नॉट इवन लिंक्डइन, इट यूज्ड टू बी लाइक monster.com एंड क्या क्या रहता था उस टाइम. तो आई गेट एन ईमेल की रिप्लाई कि ओके वी वुड लाइक टू इंटरव्यू. नीचे कोई देसी नाम ही था ऑब्वियसली, और वेबसाइट भी थी. I legit found spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes on their website, and I was so desperate कि मैं एक बार सोच यार कर दिया ये ठीक है, इग्नोर कर देते हैं, अप्लाई कर देते हैं, क्या जॉब. एंड दैट पोजीशन वाज अगेन दैट बिजनेस एनालिस्ट एंड ऑल. ठीक है, तो इंटरव्यू के लिए अप्लाई किया, हुआ,
मैं
एंड
बताऊं
फास्टेस्ट हायरिंग प्रोसेस एवर हुआ था वो. ठीक है, तो इट वाज लाइक कि दे कॉल्ड मी, और ऑब्वियसली अब मेरा उसमें बैचलर्स प्लस मास्टर्स ऑफ मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग सब कुछ ये मेरे रिज्यूमे में लिखा है. तो फोन उठा के जस्ट टू बी सीरियस दे आस्क्ड मी कि व्हाई डू यू वांट टू बिकम अ बिजनेस एनालिस्ट. मैं बोला भाई तेरे को पता है ना, मतलब नहीं लग रही है जॉब तो करना है, लेकिन अब उसमें भी जो बना चढ़ा के आंसर जो रखा था वो दिया कि नो ऐसे थोड़ा आगे एमबीए करेंगे, ये करेंगे वो करेंगे टाइप का कुछ कुछ करके. ओके ओके गुड. बोलते हैं कि ओके लेट मी कनेक्ट यू टू माई डायरेक्टर, ऐसे कुछ तो. एंड आई स्वेयर देयर इज नो वे ऑफ प्रूविंग इट, बट आई स्वेयर ऐसा लगा कि उसने फोन ऐसे दे दिया किसी, मतलब इट वाजंट लाइक कि मतलब यू नो आजू बाजू में ही बैठे थे वो घर में काउच पे, ऐसा लगा मुझे. एंड वही 2 मिनट के बाद सब हो गया. 15 मिनट्स आई गेट अ ऑफर लेटर, एंड देन दे उसमें फिर साथ में ऑफर लेटर के साथ वो डिटेल्स थी कि वी विल बेसिकली हमारे ये क्लाइंट्स हैं, सो वी विल मेक श्योर दैट अच्छी खासी फ्लावरी लैंग्वेज में कि वील एनहांस योर रिज्यूमे एंड ट्रेन यू एंड ये और वो. तो मैंने बोला ये तो कुछ घपला ही लग रहा है, तो अपन so I said no, sorry.
Lot of these,
Join नहीं किया.
लोग desperate हो जाते
a lot
हैं.
of these companies have been blacklisted retrospectively. So I have like one of my brother's friends, he applied for one of these companies. उसका भी यही problem था. He was working at a clothing retailer company back end में, and they were not e-verified like that specific office. So he was in trouble for some time, and he's like, yeah, they will give me a job, but it'll take me some time. In time में I'll be out of status, which, you know, when you're in the middle of two visas, like transferring from OPT, getting an OPT extension to the other, during that time, if you're stuck in a bad place, it can go really south for you. Yeah.
अभी वैसे बाइडेन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ने पता है वो ऑटोमेटिक ओपीटी वो कर दिया. सो लाइक इफ यू आर इन दैट यू विल योर ओपीटी कैन एक्सटेंड बियॉन्ड 12 months and till you get your
हाँ,
H1.
तो
Anyway, sorry.
ये बंदा फिर अपने H1B इंटरव्यू के लिए जाता है, and they ask, you know, have you ever associated with this company? And he had not even accepted the offer from them. He had just applied and used that company's name as his application, but then he cancelled that application and then he refiled क्योंकि ये company e-verify हो गई थी उतने time में. And just that level of association was enough for him to get his visa rejected. And it took him 7 to 8 months after that to resolve this. And the mental trauma for him, he was getting married at that time, you know, to lose your job, to not really be
No,
sure.
so ऐसी
So
situation
Richa,
में
some
you
people
should
do
do
have
that.
the pit in the
Yeah.
stomach dread. ना मतलब, or
हाँ.
am I just the
No,
only
but
person
to be
who never
honest,
It happens.
ऐसी situation में
You know what? I
shouldn't
think with
just, I mean,
Yeah.
just do the right thing. And मतलब ऐसे if you try to do a fraud, then it just complicates things anyway. तो
यहाँ फ्रॉड की कहाँ से बात आ गई? लाइक फ्रॉड करना होता पीएचडी प्रोग्राम में क्यों घुसते? मतलब अलग तरह, हम लोग क्लियरली अलग तरह का फ्रॉड
no, I'm talking about these people who I know थोड़ा desperate situation हो जाती है, but
Yeah, that's what it's very
I mean, yeah,
interesting,
it's
like how you put it, because
Basically,
it's
problem
very
तभी
clear
आती
to
है
me that my
हाँ
relationship with the United States is one of labor. Like as long as I can provide labor, I can be here. The moment I am incapacitated, कल को मैं साइकिल पे जा रही हूँ, मेरा एक्सीडेंट हो गया, मेरे सर पे चोट लग गई, तो in 2 months I will not even be able to live in this country. Like there is no humanity in the existence here because it's very transactional. I hear you saying that there is more to this existence in the US than this.
And this situation also depends on the company that you're working for. That so like my company provides a pretty lengthy, क्या कहते हैं उसे, they have two phases actually, a short-term disability leave and then a long-term disability leave, and it covers like a good year, probably even more.
Yeah.
It's हाँ मतलब it depends, but I'm pretty
मेरे को
sure.
डेंटल आई केयर नहीं मिलता है, तो चश्मा बनाने के लिए इंडिया जाना
Oh,
पड़ता है.
so 90% of the companies might not be doing that, but at least some do. I don't know.
I think the biggest challenge is with the H1 visa is when you go through a layoff.
That is, yeah.
Because then you
Yeah.
realize that you have like a very limited time and market could be like however it is, and you have to find something. And then you either compromise or in some cases where I know where people are like, fuck this, I'm done, I'm going back. Depending on like what is your priority. It may or may not be that easy, right? So that is, I think, the biggest difficulty around it. The other thing that I'm slowly kind of realizing is that there is like, we don't realize this, but unless you reach a certain level, a certain level in your kind of roles in job, I'm talking about corporate, there is like, you will not see a 40-year-old, 45-year-old software developer. That is tough because they will always find new young kids who are ready to take that job at a slightly lesser salary. So you have to figure out, or you have to find like a place where you are like safe enough for that. So that's another thing. But again, that's the same in India. So like
Yeah.
if you were doing the
That
same
is,
job in
yeah.
India, even, that is the same.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest challenge. If you have that, the job security, if security could mean anything, then your relationship with the country is not as difficult. Like, for example, healthcare. I mean, US is brutal, right? But as far as like, if you have a good job,
Oh
the
yeah, that
healthcare is
sometimes I feel
it's
like you almost feel guilty seeing some
Yeah.
other people. They need it more.
Yeah.
Please give it to them.
yeah. In that sense, that is how it is. Quickly on the consultancy thing. So business school, Desi population, I kid you not. So like हमारा कैंपस जब खत्म होता था, उसके जस्ट खत्म होने के बाद के उस like बाहर जो इंटरस्टेट है, और इंटरस्टेट के उस तरफ ऑफ कैंपस रेजिडेंसेज हैं जहाँ पे कई लोग रहते थे, मतलब देसीज भी, सभी लोग, लाइक यूजुअली ग्रेड स्कूल के स्टूडेंट्स सब वहाँ पे. तो ड्यूरिंग, एक तो सबसे अजीब चीज होती है विच आई वाज टोटली नॉट प्रिपेयर्ड फॉर, वाज पीपल लैंड डे वन एंड दे स्टार्ट लुकिंग फॉर जॉब्स. लाइक तुम्हारा ग्रेड स्कूल शुरू भी नहीं हुआ and you've started looking for jobs. And I'm not saying campus jobs, like full-time jobs. They've already applied. And I was mentally not prepared for it, I guess. Anyway, and दूसरी चीज, जब ये टाइम आता है ना, जब actually like people start getting desperate, I kid you not, once you enter that area where off-campus housing is, I distinctly remember there was this guy, I am Babu from Babu Consultancy, New Jersey. वो कार लेके खड़ा था, और वो जब देखता था कि 4 देसी लड़के अपने साइकिल में या पैदल जो जा रहे हैं वहां अपना, वो कार लेके चल जाते थे, लिटरली लाइक कार का वो खुलता था, एंड ही वाज लाइक, hey, I am Babu from Babu Consultancy, like
That's just Key and Peele का sketch
ये
लग रहा है
लेवल
मुझे.
था.
नहीं, actually the office में जो where he picks up the Dwight picks up, yeah.
Richa, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah.
Again, I know that you also entered at a very high skill level and couple of years before me, for example.
So I also graduated in 2013 and there was no lack of jobs then, but there was a remnant of a recovery from the 2008 financial crisis. So you couldn't actually
Yeah.
work for large car companies, like large automotive companies, directly. They wouldn't hire you because they were not allowed to, while they were still paying back debt from the US government, they were not allowed to actually hire foreign workers. Of course, they got around it by
Yeah.
hiring people through consultancies and through these contract companies. But the job scene was not that bad. Pretty much everyone in my batch got a job, I think.
No, I
Barring one or
think
two people.
the only
Barring one or two
people, in
people,
fact,
yeah.
they were not even the only 2 or 3 people that I know who did not get a job were all by choice. Like they wanted to do PhD or to go back to. I think one of them went back and
Yes,
they were from like
exactly.
environmental engineering or something like that was their department. But every other department, pretty much everyone got a
इसको भी
job
अब
back then.
लाल टोपी खरीदनी पड़ेगी। मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन। ये कौन से टाइमलाइन में फंस गए?
I actually haven't seen too many people
नहीं,
wear.
I
I've seen
want
like
to because
one
it sounds
person.
like there was a
Yeah,
time when America was great.
actually,
Yeah,
But
that's
speaking,
true. But I mean, so I did not apply for an H1B in 2013 because I actually was not happy with the company that I joined. It was in storage, and I found that extremely boring. Storage isn't like hard drives and they're very, solid state devices, and I found it extremely boring. And I was like, "ये job to मुझे change करना है. I don't want to stay here." So I didn't apply for an H1B, which I knew that it would take some amount of time to get that processed and all of that, and I wanted to change my job before then. But then the next year, what happened is
yeah.
there was a lottery. My H1B did not get picked.
You get 2 attempts or you have
So I was
whatever.
like, I got one more
Some people get 3 attempts.
in
I think it
2015.
has something to do with the cycle where you graduate. Some people get 3 attempts. That's what I've seen.
So I
okay.
got 3.
So that's
Yeah.
good now. Like 2 years, no
So
no taxes.
yes, but
Yeah, not
a
worth
little
the
bit
not worth
extra
the mental
stress
stress.
that I
Yeah.
needed to. So
I was so
yeah.
confident. Sorry, Richa, you complete this thing. Sorry.
Yeah, then I got it the next year, like thankfully, but a few of my friends did have to go for, day one
Yeah, yeah,
CPT. They had to join another college, make sure it's a non-profit
yeah.
college. Like, for example, now, so if it's a private college that does that, you're going to be
Yeah.
in big trouble in terms of bringing your visa. So, but I would still say, like, not everyone who's on an H1B in this line is as calm. Like people kind of go in and out. There's still some people who are very upset, for example, when they see, Ukrainians got a lot of visas. They got a lot of green cards.
तुम्हें तो PhD है, तुमको तो सीधा ग्रीन कार्ड दे देंगे, तुम क्या हमारी लाइन
No,
में खड़े होगे?
so that's the thing, right? I have other than you guys, believe it or not, I do have some other friends with PhDs as well. So you guys just have a very like you work too much. Like I am fine. Like if at this level of work, this level of hardship, I don't get it. I accept it. उससे ज़्यादा होना नहीं है मेरे से. That's what I'm saying. So
नहीं, say I'm at that point in my life where it's like failure feels better because at least there is finality. There is something that it's like there is no way to go down once you fail at everything. No, so अभी I'm like मेरे को rejection ही better sound कर रहा है because at least then I know exactly what is to happen next as opposed to this constant game of
बस मैं
going up, going down.
if you are, it also depends, right? So maybe it's very individual, based on every individual. एक तो PhD करने के लिए ही थोड़ा सा एक level of interest and ready to hard work होना ही चाहिए, वो तो given है. But if you're not doing that, I have friends who were really really married to the fact कि नहीं इसी फील्ड में किया है, इसी में करना है और यही मेरा पैशन है और इसी फील्ड में मैं करूंगा. And I have seen them go through a lot of all this thing because सब वही mechanical में ही वो सब कर रहे थे, तो like oh my god यहाँ job नहीं मिल रही, oh my god ये sponsor नहीं कर रहा है. So the day I think the day my internship had finished, which I had done in a proper manufacturing company. In fact, उस दिन क्या मतलब स्टार्ट करने के 2 हफ्ते में ही मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया था कि ये अपने बस का नहीं है. Just by the pure virtue of की location, the colleagues that I'm getting, who everybody's 20 years or older than me, and so I was like, and then I had in the back of mind, ये साला वो सॉफ्टवेयर वाला वहां चला गया है, कोई न्यूयॉर्क में बैठा है, कोई कैलिफोर्निया में ऐश कर रहा है. तो then I was like कि नहीं. So and fortunately for me I didn't. So my tip is don't like be flexible and because at the end of the day तुम if you're not doing a PhD तुम इतना भी कोई इतने पैशनेट नहीं हो तुम किसी चीज के लिए यार. तुम्हें अच्छी खासी जॉब चाहिए तो जस्ट बी फ्लेक्सिबल एंड डू इट. लाइक पैशन मत फॉलो करो. वो सब वो करोगे तो फिर बाद में स्टैंड अप कॉमेडी करनी पड़ेगी उसके बाद मतलब.
वो तो है. Speaking of
Just
not following
yeah.
passions, we are joined today by another co-host of the Small India Radio family, MV. One of the consistent things that MV has discussed is how having a passionate life and working for a living are not overlapping things in their life. MV, first question to you, like, how did you find something that makes money, and how do you keep yourself motivated to wake up in the morning every day?
EMIs.
वही है भाई.
नहीं.
See, that's the most practical approach. That's the
Yeah,
way
I
it should
mean,
be.
whenever I have people who visit from outside India, most of the circle is quite privileged. So one of the relatives keeps talking about the fact that there's a guy called David Grush and there's aliens and there's life outside Earth and all of that. And we end up always telling him, the 3-4 of us who meet him, is that, boss, we have potholes on our road and we have EMIs to pay. So this is not on our mind at all. तो कृपया करके रियलिटी में आओ और अपने 2 बच्चे के साथ क्या कर रहे हो तुम वो बताओ और and let us know if there are like real things we can talk about. I started as what is called a business analyst, but very quickly realized that that was not something I would have liked, even though I was getting good at it. And then had to move to, let's say, what is called a traditional family business. And then very quickly also realized that's also not something I like. So I moved to something I like, which is, let's say, running a business myself. Yeah, I think that's what I've been doing for the last at least 10 years. Now, at least in a reduced role, because you realize again later that that stress is not worth it. I travel anywhere between 150 days a year to 200 days a year sometimes. That's also reduced. Sales is something that I do, so all galis are acceptable, all abuse is acceptable.
I think the question that sprung this particular episode was what was it like to grow up in the city that you grew up in, and what was exposure like in terms of finding your career path and what you wanted to do with your life?
Yes. So I grew up in Calcutta. I studied in one of the most prestigious schools in Calcutta. Just that it was the most prestigious school in the state board. The middle or higher class kids in the city did not like it because they had better schools. But in my school, I grew up in a cocoon because my school famously has about 14,000 kids. And we had 16 sections, 8 in morning and 8 in afternoon in each class, in each standard. And in each of these 8 sections, there was one Hindi section. So I was part of that Hindi section. So you ended up living in Bengal or in Calcutta, but away from Bengalis. Luckily for me, I had good friends because sport allows you to mix and match and all of that. So I was, I think, one of the few in the class who at least had friends from other sections who were Bengalis. So that gave me a lot of exposure as to how they live, how they grow up. My father's fairly liberal, so he had asked कि क्या करना है पता करो. In fact, I remember class 8 or 9, we had even gone and met counselor to understand what are my strengths, weaknesses, and stuff. That made me realize that probably journalism or law is where uh, my allegiances would lie. So every Durga Puja, we used to go for a holiday because dad was like, I've seen enough Durga Puja in Calcutta. We might as well go out and see what is there in India. So we'd like pretty much get onto a Rajdhani, get to Delhi, and then move somewhere in the north or then even in Madhya Pradesh and all of these places. So I had this thing where my dad would send me to the tourism department's office and get all the brochures. Picking a queue on that, class 8 or 9, I went to all the journalism school ka brochures lene from different universities across Calcutta, and there were law entrance coaching centers. So I got all the brochures of the law entrance exam wale bhi. When I had that adult conversation in class 8 कि यही दो चीज़ है और ये रहे 12 या 13 whatever brochures, I was told पागल हो गया, ये कौन करता है? So, that had also, I think my family and everybody thought कि probably there's not enough money in journalism, and so that's how journalism got cut out. And then my dad had a long history of battling legal issues across like family and stuff. So he always had this angst against lawyers probably. So I guess वो बोले कि नहीं law भी नहीं करना है. So I ended up finding a graduate business management course, and I said कि one thing is non-negotiable, that I want to move out of this city, that is Calcutta.
Why was that?
Because everybody.
So other
हाँ
than
बताइए.
नहीं, मैं थोड़ा सा different direction में ही जा रहा था. You finish your story first.
नहीं, so why did I leave Calcutta? Because first reason was the same course, that business management course in Calcutta was starting at 2 in the afternoon and ending at 7 in the evening, which is a waste of a day apparently. And it was not a great. The professors weren't that good as well, because वो भी मेरे research में आ गया था. Now that I was doing this, I had researched on this as well. And then I went to Bangalore and studied.
तो मैं सिर्फ ये पूछ रहा था कि it looks like MV's parents didn't force science on them. तो क्या?
In fact, my father's long-standing regret is that I didn't take up science in 11 and 12. But वो मैंने game कर दिया था system. वो हमारे school में जब वो form भरने जाने का होता था 11th and 12th का, I had put commerce because I felt कि मेरे 10th में, so we had accounting in 9th and 10th.
तो बाकी rest of you also like
Very
was,
interesting.
because in my case
मेरे ऊपर था.
I'm 100% sure it's a bit of, I don't know, like I can safely say at this stage that I enjoyed science more than it's definitely a nature of the household that I grew up in and everything. मतलब free will तो नहीं होती है कुछ, but in that regard, I was lucky. Although they were forcing it on me, they obviously Indian parents, and they were forcing it on.
Yeah.
मतलब they were forcing for better marks, but fortunately, it wasn't like कि मैं रोता नहीं था मतलब Betsy Verma लगाते time. That's one.
नहीं, so for me,
Oh my
math
God.
was a little. For me, math was a little difficult, but वो हमारा cut off होता था. So if you need to get science, you need to score 240 out of 300.
It was a percentage based on in our school. Like 10th में इतने percent आए तो इस school में मिलेगा, otherwise नहीं मिलेगा types.
Which is funny because I was terrible at math, but I still got a 99 out of 100 in my board exam in the 10th. The only year in my entire life.
ये कैसे terrible था? I think you are still
मैं
terrible at
बताऊं
math, because if you're terrible,
क्योंकि
99
मैंने
out of
सारे
200 होगा
सवाल
शायद.
रट लिए थे. I had memorized every question going
Math
back
कैसे
20
रट लिया
years.
यार?
Because the board exam में तो वही 10 question घुमा फिरा के आते हैं ना.
So
I had
again,
everything
yeah.
committed to memory going back 20 years. You asked me a question, I knew the answer. I did not use the math at all. I went into that hall and I used memory to beat it.
I think in this regard, I am.
So, which year is your 12th make? Sorry,
नहीं,
if
मैं
you
बोल रहा था
don't
कि
mind
in
asking.
this regard I was very lucky and I am indebted to that teacher जो 9th class में हमें math पढ़ाते थे. Like the way he taught us, मतलब I connected with him so much, and towards the end
Right.
he actually just he wrote a song for us to memorize the periodic, not just मतलब मैथ तो वो पढ़ाते ही थे and साथ में बाकी चीजों में भी ऐसे हेल्प करते थे, like simple pendulum का concept समझाने के लिए he basically wrote a song, poem type का ऐसा कुछ,
Wow.
तो
Yeah, we had a chemistry
मतलब
tutor like that.
yeah,
अभी मुझे
so
मुझे
हाँ मतलब उनकी वजह
नोबेल
से
फैमिली का
रटने की
क्या है,
कभी जरूरत नहीं
हेलिना
पड़ी
कब्र से फरार, सो मेरे को याद है कि आई नो दैट वन नाना पापा आंटी
बेटा
सब
मांगे
बीमार।
कार स्कूटर बाप
नहीं,
रोए।
this is हाँ but sorry हाँ
नहीं, but which year did you
बोलो।
do your 12th?
2010
मतलब I think there has been I'm sure you are like underselling yourself, but I also have to say that there has been a certain amount of inflation in the kind of the marks that kids get, and these days may I probably maybe not 2010 या जो
सीबीएसई
भी
में
मतलब
उतना like I think science and math side में there are some things which they keep trying to change, like they want to include more 1 mark questions which are always new and more concept based and application based, but then the long questions they always keep it in the same way. And 10th में तो the only way to score well in an exam like English where you're supposedly supposed to use your intellect to pass, प्राइमर आता है, अगर आप वो प्राइमर के आंसर रट के नहीं जाओगे तो आपको मिलेंगे 65%। वही आंसर प्राइमर रट के जाओगे तो मेरी तरह आएंगे 93%। एंड इट हैज नो, it's just the CBSE way to do things. Those
there
marks are so
was
meaningless. Sorry, Richa, what were you saying?
So I have an anecdote about the drastic schooling change that happened for me. So in the 5th grade, I was not in India. I was in the UK, and in the 6th grade, I moved to India. मेरा जो पहला unit test था, so I didn't do very well in it, of course, because I'm used to that education system. So my teacher sat down with me and she's like, you need to write longer answers. And I'm like, but it says answer in brief.
संक्षिप्त में बताइए।
What?
I love it.
And she's like, no. Brief means brief but big.
So
इंडिया वाला brief का।
इसमें there was only one like English teacher in my school who was very good in this. So बाकी सबका वही था, लेंदी लिख दो. She actually had custom paper made where the answer sheet में it was a box. So you answer it within this box. अब तुम उसमें चीटी जितना छोटा लिखो चाहे बड़ा लिखो, but it has to be in that box.
हाँ
And of course like इतना छोटा लिख दोगे
निशांत
कि समझ
ये
में नहीं आएगा।
सीबीएसई का था
वो ये
9th से
सीबीएसई का था क्या?
हमारे
हाँ ओके,
सीबीएसई
हाँ तो फिर होगा
इंग्लिश का
यार।
क्वेश्चन पेपर ऐसे ही आता था,
हाँ
9th क्लास से ऐसे ही
which was
आता था,
so
तो
good.
हम लोग को भी ऐसे ही था। हाँ
11th 12th में much like many of you, there was a need to take science, and it was PCMB, and so it was everything.
नहीं
मुझे
PCM B,
क्लास 5 से
but
M
the
और B
पता है
only
साथ में नहीं
कि
but
होगा,
I will say
M होगा या तो B होगा।
मैं B लिया, I was like करना है तो हम करेंगे सब, B मुझे लेना था, and my mother was like you cannot let go of math at this point, maths तुम जिंदगी में कुछ भी कर लो, maths तो तुम्हें पढ़नी पड़ेगी, and तो मम्मी के
I was so
कहने
good
पर
at
लेना पड़ा।
history, even like literally 8th 9th 10th में हिस्ट्री के एग्जाम के पहले मेरी पूरी क्लास में, मतलब पूरी क्लास बोले तो like slight exaggeration, but most kids of my class who would come to my place and I would literally like teach them.
अभी भी यही कर रहे हो?
हाँ ठीक नहीं मतलब मैं बता रहा हूँ, and then right during my 10th boards I just said as part of the conversation ki I think I'll be good if I take arts, and because history is something that I'm really good at. And my dad, without thinking, said, do you want to eat food or not in the future?
That's
As
nice
in,
of
do you
your
want to earn
dad.
enough to have food? And that was it. Yeah. And like I think from class 5th I knew that I'd have to do engineering. Medicine भी नहीं, लड़की है अगर
I
घर
never
में तो वो
understood
medicine
this
हाँ
logic.
doctor.
यार
हाँ, लड़की है तो वो medicine करेगी, लड़का है तो
देखो
engineering
देखो,
करेगा, like
यहाँ पे मेरी किस्मत
इतना
अच्छी
clear.
थी, क्योंकि जिस साल
And
हम 12th कर रहे थे उस दिन 3 Idiots आई थी, तो मेरे माँ बाप ने अलग अलग जाके अलग अलग से मूवी देखी, एंड अपने अपने टाइम से मेरे पास आए और बोले बेटा जिंदगी में जो करना है करो। तो इन एटर्नली ग्रेटफुल टू आमिर
ना
खान।
मेरे पेरेंट्स
जो मूवी में
प्रोडक्शन
जो मेरे साथ a few years before of course it happened, Bagban and Dhoom released on the same day, and my parents went to see Bagban and I went with my friends to see Dhoom. उसका मैं कभी कभी आज भी भुगतता हूँ, मुझे ऐसा लगता है।
I think my mother, even before she was married, I think she had this dream that if she has a son, like especially in the 80s, I think early 80s and all, the at least in that socioeconomic class, being an engineer was
Yeah.
like the thing, the like absolute thing that you do to prove that you are worth anything as a guy. And so like I never even like one of my buas randomly at one point suggested commerce. I don't know. I don't remember why. And it was a whole discussion after she left. Like, कैसे बोल सकती है वो तुम्हें कॉमर्स लेने को? मतलब, how dare she?
Because
Like, it was a whole
in
thing.
our time, it was like कि कम नंबर आएंगे तो कॉमर्स लेना पड़ेगा.
Well,
That was it.
हाँ.
तो है.
It nobody to
and
मतलब although I knew people who scored a good like 90% marks and chose commerce, but the general धारणा तो यही थी कि उसको साइंस मिला नहीं, इसलिए वो
हाँ, और यही बोलते थे. आज तक मैंने नहीं सुना कि
yeah,
उसको कॉमर्स लिया है.
yeah,
साइंस मिला नहीं बोलते
yeah.
थे. One of my cousins, who was very weak academically, ended up taking commerce, and that I'm 37 now. He's also 37. That thing is so painful for him even today that he will randomly like say, यार मुझसे भी गधे लोगों ने मैथ साइंस ले लिया था यार, इतने सारे प्राइवेट इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज थे, ले लेता. That is kind of like feeling kind of it does. मैं बता रहा हूँ, मैं जैसे unlike Nishant, I have always been much more interested in history and English literature. I've always
In
liked
being a
reading and all
Bengali,
that.
basically, but
Maybe. But
Yeah, I mean, again,
Jabalpur.
my mother, both my parents are
Yeah.
engineers, and so it was very hard not to see that as the future. But fortunately, ऐसे life में हो जाता है. But let me phrase this as a question, right? For me, in the 11th and 12th, what I was studying, there was a passionate reason to do it because going to a coaching center meant that I can learn more without the expectation of having to do really well. Because the exams that they would give there, it was really not possible to score well because they were competitive questions. So आप जाओ, आप पढ़ो, and the expectation is कि वो लोग एक quiz करेंगे and you won't do well, but nobody cares. So the value of going to a coaching class to prepare for PMTs was that I get to actually learn more biology than my school can give me. Did any of you have that experience with your education where besides the perfunctory ki you're doing this because life mein aage badhna hai, there was something in your education that made you passionate and you were able to follow it?
मेरे लिए तो पूरे like I can actually still picture those teachers who in somehow made it interesting. And because मेरे को कभी भी मेरे पूरी स्कूल हिस्ट्री में कोई सोशल साइंस या हिस्ट्री का ऐसा कोई टीचर नहीं मिला जो इंटरेस्टिंग बना के पढ़े, बट मैथ और फिजिक्स और केमिस्ट्री तीनों के मिले. तो दैट आई थिंक प्लेड अ ह्यूज रोल. इवन इन माई कोचिंग में तो खैर इवन फॉर द IIT JEE ट्रिपल ई कोचिंग में भी द मैथ टीचर वाज जस्ट अनदर लेवल. मतलब लाइक जस्ट मजा ही आ जाता था. मतलब इट वाज लाइक कि एग्जाम नहीं भी हो तो भी 1 घंटा इनके साथ पढ़ ही लेते हैं, मजा आएगी. सो I think, yeah, for me, mostly that. Mostly क्या, only that. Because घर पे तो बस प्रेशर ही रहता था कि यार उसके इतने मार्क्स आ रहे हैं, तुम्हारे क्यों नहीं आ रहे, ये वो.
First and foremost, इसके पहले you guys were talking about marks. So state board में you don't get above 80-85%.
कौन सा स्टेट बोर्ड? तमिलनाडु के लिए सच
हमारे
नहीं
तो
है.
मतलब West Bengal. So I think even getting 75 was insane, and like in the 12th, even getting 70 was a big deal. In fact, at 72 or 73, you could get into the best commerce college in Calcutta, St. Xavier's. So it was that bad. So it used to be 70 to 73 for West Bengal State Board, and then they would add another 15 to 18% for other boards. So let's say an ICSE or CBSE would start at 90-91 for application. So yeah. So and about passion, yeah. I think typically I had only two passions across school. One was quizzing and the second was cricket. Cricket age 13 में ही cancel हो गया when I got dropped from the state team after 2 hours of practice because they picked a local Bengali boy. So it was very funny. Went to Eden, practiced for 2 hours, living their dream for 2 hours. Like, this is where you're going to play all your life types. And that coupled with obviously falling grades. So it's like, "Ki band karo ye cricket. Band ho gaya cricket." But the second passion was quizzing. So what happened is, luckily for me, in the last 10 years, at least 5 out of the 10 years, there was a time as part of a company where we ran an e-learning app for sales folks, which is essentially a leaderboard led thing for quizzing salespeople and getting them to learn more things on the go in India. So that passion of quizzing kept continuing. But on the side, we were parallelly running, at least at that point in time, one of India's largest quizzing companies. So at least that ability to hold on to some part of your childhood was there for like a good 5 years. It was properly good fun to let's say conduct quizzes, go on stage, have a mic in your hand, and all of that. And all of these things essentially tell you ki you probably get good at public speaking, and that is a key skill in sales.
Right.
Essentially, people are not buying from a company, they're buying from people. And that's how that career path over the last 10 years, because you're not just conducting quiz, you also have to sell it. Yeah, so the sales journey has continued. So I guess in many ways, sales is like stand-up comedy, like, because I have a pitch which I have to hone over, let's say 500, 600 times. And then it becomes so good that it just rattles off your tongue. And people are like mesmerized at the kind of examples you're giving or the kind of anecdotes you throw in and stuff like that. So I think that is something. So in my mind, I'm always preparing 5 minute, 7 minute new bits that I can help get more sales with.
That's a really
I know
cool way
you.
to put it.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't have any good teachers in my bachelor's of engineering. But what I did have is a really thriving art scene because I went to a mid-level college, right? And Pune is very much about its cultural scene. So my college, the best people from my college you would see coming in at 6 p.m. every day after college is over. So that's when, the college really would come alive. You would have the art circle folks, you would have, I used to run debate, so there was a lot of debate people. We would have our big discussions. But the arts people, they were the ones that I really liked and loved watching them, even though a lot of it was in Marathi. And a lot of these people actually, some of them did go on to work in the Marathi film industry, some of them, but the level of exposure from that perspective was really great. I think in terms of engineering, like interest in terms of my passion, it built up in my third year and my fourth year sort of organically as I started really liking my subjects more. I had one elective called digital image processing, which it was really random. Like I just took it because I thought this would be interesting. The other option was AI, which I did not take, which I'm totally fine with not taking any AI. But that is actually still useful today in my job because I work with sensors, right? So cameras, radars, things like that. So some of those concepts are still useful to me, but I just love that subject. So that was the first time when I read the whole big reference book and took lots of notes and tried out lots of different things. But yeah, until my master's, I really did not enjoy professors teaching as much. Like in my master's, I really did, but also not as much through lectures, but more from doing like projects and things like that. To build robots and stuff like that. Now I really love my technical work.
Everybody I speak to who's at least passionate about what they do, they keep telling me that the education system outside India has just so much practicality built into the system. Vis-a-vis in India, it's just always books. So even in my grad, like the books were like really old. We used to get like some Philip Kotler 84 में वो जो लिखा है example वही पढ़ा रहे थे. So I think through my graduation, I studied from Wikipedia. It was okay. I mean, it was more practical. But what's your perspective? I mean, you guys, considering you guys studied abroad.
I think it's just less monotonous. Like the teachers actually care about you learning. Like that is the one key difference. They're not trying to go through a syllabus and complete it and try to make sure the students get marks. They actually really want you to learn the concept. Not all, I will say at least like 70-80%. I think that was the key difference. So, one of the examples I gave in part one was a professor who's like, hey, you are not able to learn from this topic. So I need to change the way I'm assessing it. I need to
Right.
change the way I'm doing this. So he switched it into a project, and that is that really is different.
If I try to kind of take that MB, basically what Richa just said, right? I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I've done engineering in India, not MBA, so I don't know if MBA is different, but essentially every prof
I have not
has
done
the
MBA,
independence.
so
Oh, sorry. So I somehow thought, but every prof has the independence to design their own curriculum. So, for example, I'll give you a quick example. Business school में गया था ना मैं. So there was a subject that I took, which was social media and how kind of it was like corporate information planning, but it was around like how to use these modern technologies and stuff. And the whole semester was based on one book by one writer. It was around groundswell, basically जिसको आज हम virality कहते हैं कि how that is created. That was the whole semester, that one book by that professor, and the exams were two exams. One exam was you just talking to the whole class about that book and any adjacent reading that you did around that book. And the second exam was an open book exam where the questions were hypotheticals about like you are in like this, how would you do this? So there's no right or wrong. It's just how you approach that. So that is how it was done, and I think that is the key difference. The way the whole point is that why Indians are so good as H1B candidates is because we are very good at remembering, memorizing, and doing the thing exactly step by step as it is asked of us. Most Americans who have the same level of education as us are not as good with that, simply because their education system primes them to be more out of the box thinkers. Ours tries to pull us back in, like, and in my piece, again, not to plug that, but like I'm talking about not just classes, but like how prayers happen and how march past happens in school, and how a lot of it is pointless, and yet we keep doing, like, why do we do march past in school? What exactly is the point of, like, saying, doing prayers in a secular country in random, in every school? But the whole thing is that it creates us into these perfect creatures who will do as is asked of us. And business school is slightly different from like hardcore tech schools, right? Because there were classes that I took that were much like survey of marketing or negotiation. And I had a really tough time because negotiation का मैं थोड़ा एक चीज बताता हूँ. Negotiation में क्लास में एक लेक्चर जो था, वो कुछ प्रोफेसर आया, उसने प्रोजेक्टर चल के, हम लोगों ने 12 एंग्री मैन देखी, और अगले क्लास में हमने अपना पर्सपेक्टिव दिया 12 एंग्री मैन देखी. दैट वाज अ क्लास एंड द डिस्कशन अराउंड इट. आई डोंट नो इफ दैट इज हाउ इट इज, बट
Speaking of, like, just to transition into the question, something that does bring all of us together, the reason why we are all talking to each other and we are interested in being here rather than anywhere else, is that something was different, or there was some breaking of the mold or transitioning away from the mold that got us. Is there a way that all of you understand how you became, I guess, more progressive than everyone around you? Not to give this as a badge of honor or anything. It's just, do you have an answer for why? Or
so इससे पहले you asked, everybody talked about their passion and how kind of, right? So something that I never probably do, but I would like to give RSS credit where it's due.
Shakha RSS. Sorry, I thought it.
Shakha RSS,
Oh, okay,
yes.
okay.
Shakha
Oh my
RSS.
God.
राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ, because at my home,
कि राष्ट्रीय संस्कृत संस्थान भी संस्कृत भी RSS ही है, sir. Good.
Whatever was the environment, there were books, and most of these books were socio-political, cultural, although like right wing, but they were. So like when you're surrounded by books, you develop a habit of reading. Very toxic, wrong, incorrect, misrepresented, all of it, but you read.
Nice.
And I think that is why I also like fell in love with history, because I was reading a lot of these things, and then in school I was, they were teaching me history, and initially there was this conflict, and that made me more interested. But I also think that this gave me a kind of education that no school could have given me. And none of, at least my peers in engineering or school, got, because for most of them, their homes were not as highly political as mine was. So when I was 3 years old, I peed in the lap of K. Sudarshan. K. Sudarshan is now he's gone, but he was the Sarsang Chalak before this one. So that's the kind of family that I come from. The JP Nadda is my cousin, like Mubola cousin Pisho, Fufa.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, Jabalpur के son-in-law. उनकी सासू माँ हमारी member of parliament थी 15 साल. So then I left home and I was in a different city doing my engineering and all. So now I don't have the home ka koi kuch bhi, and now I'm like doing my thing. And two things happened. One was, for the first time in my life, making friends with people who are not like me, basically Muslims. And then slowly, so basically because of that, there was a moment where we went back when things were not as political, right? Before Modi, it was not as charged as it is now. So people would have these open debates, and people would not be as careful about what they're saying, especially if they don't agree with the regime. And I had this debate in 2006 with my roommate who's a Muslim about the Gujarat riots, and how I was saying that Modi is my icon, and he's taking the revenge of the Hindu humiliation of 1,000 years and all that. And slowly over time, I just started, there were different experiences that made me see the flaw in my argument. In fact, 2009 Lok Sabha election, my first ever vote, पहली बार लाइफ में जो वोट दिया मैंने 2009 लोक सभा इलेक्शन में दिया है, बीजेपी को दिया है, अडवाणी जी को, so that's where I come from. By 2009, even voting was like a family pressure, because by then I had almost changed, and by that end of 2009-10, I was completely transformed. And उसके बाद तो बस, so I don't really, there is no, I don't know, there were the experiences that made me evaluate my own positions, and I think that position evaluation happened because I had this habit of reading.
Thank you for that. Richa?
Not that different, actually. So I would say reading is probably step one in my political journey and in my progressive outlook. So I was an insane reader. Like, I would just go through books. I would sit and read for hours and hours, go through books in days. Like, I have spent morning to night reading continuously and taking breaks just to literally go and eat, or just be forced to take breaks to go outside at times. So I was an insane reader. And the one thing that reading teaches you and young fiction teaches you is, one, empathy, and two, you tend to value things like honesty, fairness, justice, equality, these kinds of things, not in an overt way, right? But Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, these kind of books, they do teach you these things, and they teach you also to value courage. Then through my engineering college, like, most of the people that I went to engineering with, they are really right wing. I find it really strange that you can go and go to the same schools and go to the same colleges and come out completely different and view that experience completely differently. Like, I just couldn't understand this. But I wasn't really focused on politics until actually it was the beef ban.
Oh, yeah.
So in 2014, 2015, one of the first things that happened, and I wasn't specifically like very anti-Modi, I wasn't pro-him, never liked him, because I remember the 2002 massacre, and I was like, yeah, I don't understand you people who are okay with forgiving that. But I saw the beef ban, and that was the first time I really read into insidious. It was like, on the face of it, a lot of my friends and relatives were like, yeah, what is the big deal? It's already banned in India. But then when you actually look into it, like why that was done, the underlying reasons behind it, I was like, hang on a minute. This doesn't feel right. Like, it feels like we're being pushed into a more regressive society than we need to be. And then immediately after Trump, in 2015, just the experience of being in this country when Trump gains popularity and gains power and says incredibly racist things, it's almost a necessity. Like you kind of have to know what's going on. You have to be in the know. You have to be a little bit more savvy about the politics around you. And yeah, that that changed everything.
Do you think your gender played a role in it at all?
Of course. And, you know, because I mean, you're as a woman, as you're considered a minority in most spaces you occupy. So you're always aware of microaggressions that are happening against you. You're people tell you to take notes in meetings, stuff like that. It used to be more common earlier. It isn't anymore, but you're always kind of aware of these microaggressions and you talk to other women about this. You don't necessarily talk to men about this. But the Me Too movement, yes, that was the first time I think I saw men really talk about this a lot more. But yeah, it just makes you more empathetic and it makes you understand how you would feel in a space where you are not the majority opinion, you are not assumed to be right.
I hear you. MV?
Multiple things. First, I think my dad also went to Shaka and he despised it. And he went at a later age. He didn't go at an early age. He lost his parents very early. He lost his father at least very early. And then essentially had to bring up the family. So I think he was looking for social circles, and one of them, while playing some sport, was one place where the Shaka would meet and everything. So he hated it. So he'd always spoken about it, that he hated it. He was a congressy, as he would say. So that was always at the back of my mind, that I can't be supporting the BJP and then, or the right wing for that matter. The second thing was, of course, luckily for me, I was in a new city and not many friends in college, or at least after college, there weren't many friends because I was immersed in work purely because it was the year right after the financial crisis. So I'd got an internship at a bank and there were 10 people in my team. I'd got the pre-placement offer. And when I joined the team back, there were a total of 4 people, including me, in the same team. And whatever, so the famous story is that generally it takes a month to get all the accesses in this large bank. So 1 month is like honeymoon period. So while everybody around me was in their honeymoon period, I was clocking in 15 hours, I think, from day one. You find, let's say, respite online. And that's how I think I met a lot of folks online on Twitter.
You're like OG Twitter person, right? Like in terms of having an account.
Like I know my first tweet was around 2007.
2007, so. Wow. OG का भी OG, like उसने app बनाया, उसने launch किया and आप हाजिर.
Yeah, it must have been very late in 2007, early 2008, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, very, very early. And there was nobody at that point in time. I think there was a cricket Twitter, so to speak, and that spawned into a political group on its own. And everybody, I think it's been the case across my life. Essentially, the groups that I've always moved around with, whether it's been cricket or quizzing or let's say even Twitter for that matter, there are always people who are very, very elder to me, like at least 5, 6, 10 years ka gap. So you're always like, oh wow, this is such a different nuanced perspective that I might not have. So I think that shaped it as well. And then when you start reading about 2002, then you start reading about Hitler, you start reading about the Holocaust, because I was not a big reader. I probably read my first book in class 11. I was only interested in going to the Calcutta Book Fair every year and buying either one Tintin that was allowed or one Bonvita quiz contest book. So both of them were 160 rupees. And those you were allowed to buy one every year. So I would go and buy that. And so the only thing I read was probably the newspaper diligently. And Calcutta had a good English newspaper. Telegraph was a very good English newspaper, at least at that point in time. So I started reading. And then when you start reading, I think then the parallels to what was happening in India vis-a-vis what was happening in 1930s Germany was more apparent to me, especially because Richa spoke about the beef pan, right? Like I was in Dadri, I think, few days after uh, the first Dadri incident happened, and it seemed absurd कि ऐसा हो भी सकता है, because it seemed like a village, like any other village, considering I traveled quite a lot by then as well. And then the other thing is, I think travel shapes you. So, like traveling not just in India, outside India, but mostly like I've traveled a lot in India. You see that things are not as hunky dory as they seem on a newspaper or a television channel, or whatever numbers are being put out, because you see the inherent difficulty of just living in India. So वो gives you a lot of वो कि नहीं यार ये सब गलत चल ही रहा है. I remember 2014 end itself. There are these 14 tenets of fascism. I have that screenshot. I'd keep sending it to random people. I think this is the Lawrence
Nice,
Britt
okay.
one. So I would send this to pretty much everybody with the same line that I used then, and I use it even now. कि I'm sending this to you, but it's not for a fact that I'll be right in 10 years. It's for the fact that I will be right in 10 years, but I'll be sad and you will be too. The fact of the matter is that people have wholesomely lapped up fascism in India. So they are still not sad, because what has happened also is that the middle class is the shit that has risen to the top. It's not the cream anymore. We are so far removed from any kind of trouble that anybody has. And COVID has just इतना ज्यादा income equality को, it has like doubled or tripled it, that there is no way for the person right at the bottom of the food chain, or even one two levels above that, to even come close to where the kind of wealth that, let's say, the middle class has reached already. And the other thing is, like, I've always, work from home is another thing, right? Like while everybody was working from home across COVID, for large parts I was inside a car, driving around the country. I probably did between 21 and 22, I probably did about 80 odd thousand kilometers.
So you were Barkhadat
Just driving.
without the income and the
I was
book.
trying to, no, we were essentially trying to save the company. We had just launched a product. We didn't have money to do anything except like try to sell it. So I was just traveling all around the country trying to show that this is the product that I have and this is what we're doing. And we can't take flights because I had a 3-year-old at home. I had 75-year-old in-laws. So there's no way I could bring this back home. So I was taking as many precautions as possible and just driving around. So when you drive around is when you realize that everything is shut. Like highways were desolate. Like driving on a highway in India, in South India or North India or East India or South or even West India mostly. Highways are littered with dhabas, and there is liveliness in that drive. There's no liveliness in the drive. In fact, I have gone and eaten multiple times at dhabas where it was shut to the public, but you would go back into the kitchen and get food,
Speakeasy
because they
for
were also
food.
trying to run their business. Speak easy for food because COVID. Because a lot of truck drivers were also driving, but they were not getting food. So how do they get food? So they would park at a petrol bunk and then they would walk 500 meters or a kilometer to that speakeasy dhaba, so to speak, and have food at the back, and go back to their trucks and start driving again. And these are the things that teach you कि सब गड़बड़ चल रहा है. I have seen MH01 autos in MP. When you see an MH01 auto in MP full with the life of that person and their family in that auto, how can it not tell you that everything is wrong with what's going on around you? Sorry, long rant.
No, it's I think the pandemic was a very, very hard time, and it amazes me that people don't remember the deaths. They don't remember the pain.
No, so people can't remember the deaths because they were earning bootloads of money sitting inside their homes on Zoom
Yeah, but
calls.
if your grandmother
Uh,
passes away, your uncle, like how much death can you overlook when it happens?
no, it's a.
How
I
many of
mean,
us didn't lose people? Like ऐसा कौन है जिसके घर पे?
अब विधि का विधान कौन रोक
I
सकता
hate
है?
yeah, exactly. It had become death had become normal. So it was like, ठीक है, वो चले गए. It was really strange. And I was trying to help people, and I had friends who were doctors who were trying to help people also. And I remember somebody from the US telling me that they have some relative in Kanpur, and I was in Bangalore, that they need help with. And it's this person in the US who nearly ghosted me while I was trying to help their relatives in Kanpur. And I was like कि ये तो लेवल का एम्पथी है हम इंडियंस में, वेदर इंडिया में है या बाहर है.
Oh, that never.
And the situation was so bad. The situation was so bad that this family in Kanpur, the elderly lady was hospitalized and the husband was at home, both 80 plus. And imagine having kids who are not even picking your phone call in the US, but have outsourced this also to some random guy on a Telegram group or a WhatsApp group in India. So I'm taking care of them. I'm trying to find an oxygen cylinder for them while this guy is like probably not even picking my call.
It does sound like there is the community that one is designated to in terms of where one works or where one lives or where one ends up. And then there is the, in a way, because of social media, and I think all of us came up with, right, when social media was taking off, there was the opportunity to kind of choose our own community. I had I guess, a question about that. I noticed that in after 2014, a lot of people whom I used to follow on Twitter pre 2014, they went from being fairly, like, I don't know, neutral, but slightly, I don't know, more pro business, to becoming completely Islamophobic. There was a complete 180 shift in how they were operating online. I'm sure they had the same beliefs. Is that something that you noticed too, right? And you were in India for, I think, through both terms. So
I have
how's it been like?
From 2014 to 2018, I think I've traveled to Gujarat at least 40 to 50 times. And at least 80% of the times I met people who would tell you in confidence 2002 फक्र है. I mean, क्या बोल सकते हैं, मतलब when people say that मोदी के पहले अच्छा था, I don't think अच्छा था. There was always a aversion to hiring Muslim folks in small businesses. There was always an aversion to interacting with Muslims. Segregation with Muslims, even in your class, in your school. I remember people have asked, I had Muslim friends in class, and people have asked them, do you support India or do you support Pakistan? Now it just seems absurd. कि पूछ कैसे सकते थे? It was normal in the 90s. So what are we even talking about? So it was just clear that this is just going to go bonkers. And what are we even talking about? I give this example to everybody. कि in Bangalore, and I don't know if that's the case in other South Indian cities, but Malayali Muslims run grocery stores.
Right.
And they run the biggest grocery stores in Bangalore. They've been here since the 70s and 80s. They're all named Aishwarya, Supriya, Sanjana, all these, like whatever, like very, very non-Muslim names, so to speak. Why were they hiding their identity in the 80s and 90s? Yeah, which means that they knew the rot around them. And the ones who own their identity are being otherized at this point in time. People don't go and eat at an Empire, I know for a fact now, who would readily eat a dosa chicken at night at an Empire in Bangalore, or a Paragon in Bangalore, or a Talasheri. These are all Muslim-owned restaurants, which are like the heartbeat of Bangalore in terms of eating food late at night or in the evening or whenever you need to have a bite types. Before all this Swiggy, Zomato, all this came. So we have people all around us now who don't eat at these places. In fact, vegetarianism bhi dekh lo na, matlab how it has increased since 2014. हम एग वाला नहीं खाते, हम एग वाला नहीं खाते, बट तुम एग वाला केक तो 25-30 साल से खा रहे थे मेरे सामने. तुम क्या बोल रहे हो, तुम एग वाला नहीं खाते अचानक? हम वेज रेस्टोरेंट में ही जाते हैं.
In terms of, you're not planning just your life, right? You're living in a space where you have to negotiate these conversations not just with strangers online, but also within the family, and on a more daily basis than say me or Vatsal. How does that?
Luckily, my family is very progressive, so at least that helps. My dad, like I said, is completely anti BJP. My brother is completely anti BJP. The only person I know is my brother's father-in-law, who's very pro BJP, but meeting him is like meeting an old Santa Claus. So we essentially have fun over these conversations rather than have very heated debates. And that happens once or twice a year for me. It happens every 2 weeks for my brother. But luckily for us, like family has been always very kind in this. Of course, immediate family hai, which is completely radicalized, will tell you ki Belgium में ना 50% Muslims हो गए. So you randomly do get that at a wedding or any other place. That point in time you rubbish it as much as you can because it just is how I am. Like I've always been like little rebellious. So they know कि ये ऐसे ही बात करता है तो ठीक है कोई problem नहीं है.
Labels.
हाँ, so I've no issues if they don't talk to me for my entire life. So and over the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, at least my family has taken enough steps that we are largely self-sufficient because the general problem is that if you talk bad to a relative, then how do they talk to your father or your mother? That is the general. Wo blowback is something that you're always worried about. So luckily for that as well is sorted though.
And I think I have like one final question for you. We all change with time, and to a certain extent, some of us can control how we change, and there are others who circumstances tend to change them more than their own personal actions. In your case, knowing that you are existing in an ecosystem where there are things you don't agree with, are there ways in which you make sure that you, I guess, don't fall in line? Other ways in which you keep yourself informed or give yourself space for intellectual growth?
I don't know how to answer that except for the fact that like the one thing about reading is that you end up having less friends. So the friends that I have are people who are like-minded, and it just helps to have a smaller circle rather than a large circle.
Right.
And luckily for me, that small circle has been very kind over a fairly long period of time. In fact, I would say when people say कि वो क्या है ना कि in your 30s you can't have friendships or you can't make friendships, I've made friendships both through sport and by meeting like-minded people. Largely, I think pretty much most of my friendships have been through the two things that I like, quizzing and cricket. For some strange reason, I've not had a chance to have like really rabid Sangees in my immediate circle, or at least I've eliminated them.
What about you, Vatsal? I don't think we've ever talked about this either.
मैं MV की बातों में इतना अंदर चला गया कि I forgot what the question was.
How do you keep evolving and changing and not drifting with things that happen around you?
The answer for that, I think, is going to be also the answer to your previous questions to others, which is basically like everybody said ki they do it by reading books, right? Like they keep themselves informed. But for me, the passion was not really like reading books, but it was like forming questions, like asking questions and trying to find the answers to it. So the answer can come through a book, can come through a video, whatever. Especially after my PhD training, like all PhD or people who are in academia, they develop this habit of asking questions. That is the one common thing that everyone has.
Within field ना मतलब वो दिमाग को ऐसे
within field
unscrew करके ऑफिस
but
में
मेरा
छोड़
दिमाग
के
इतना compartmentalized
Right.
नहीं है तो like for in any I'm not saying that I know everything. Whatever becomes the subject or whatever is my interest, I ask questions about it and then just try to answer it myself by looking at different sources. It could be anything. It could be books, documentaries, I don't know, like talking to other people who know about it. And that's why we do this podcast also in some ways or the other. And I don't think that habit of asking questions is ever going to just like subside ऐसे अपने आप. I guess as long as that is there, I will just keep on reading, keep on finding out answers, and keep on avoiding the shit.
MV is asking questions, something that you're able to do in any of your spaces.
Yeah, I mean, all the time at work, otherwise. So it always helps to have that kind of ecosystem also, where questions are allowed.
Right.
I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood up until class 3. And it's very funny because like I have a kid who's 6 and I remember everything, and I know that kid will remember a lot of it as well. So my earliest memory before class 3, that is before the age of 9, is that my grandmother was very pious. So she would like कि ये मत करो, पाप हो जाएगा, पाप लग जाएगा, and all of that. And I was like कि नहीं, ये technology नहीं था when let's say. So yeah, those were the earliest.
My thing was, but कैसे? लेकिन
हाँ.
कैसे? How? Why? Just the very simple. Like इनको समझ नहीं आ रहा है. तुम बोल तो बड़ी बड़ी चीजें रहे हो लेकिन समझ नहीं आ रहा है, तो समझाओ. That is the whole.
Yeah.
I had this nagging habit. Everybody hated me in school. And I know that if I was sitting next to that kid, I would also hate that kid. Like I had the privilege of like having parents who were always getting me books, no matter what kind, what subject. They would just get me books and they will be like leopard. And I loved encyclopedias. But encyclopedias का problem ये होता है, उसमें detail में नहीं लिखा होता है, right? Like there will be a cross section of an engine. And to a kid who is in class 5, doesn't understand shit, but everything looks very interesting. So I would like write down on my notebook key something from that encyclopedia and then go ask my science teacher that in science class. And the science teacher would also not know, because how would
Syllabus के बाहर से पूछ लिया.
that matlab, I would ask such weird things also that I don't like, she wouldn't or he wouldn't know, that teacher wouldn't know that things are either. So like dinosaurs का ये ऐसे क्यों होता है, तो like biology का teacher वो क्या बताएगा यार, like. So I had this nagging habit, and that nagging habit just continued on. So I want to find out answers as long as you like, as much as I can find it. So like, and until I'm satisfied. So वो मतलब वो एक सोर्स पढ़ के नहीं आता है, राइट? लाइक वो यू हैव टू लाइक फाइंड फ्यू थिंग्स, also like confirm your answers, confirm your quote unquote theories in your head that you made up to answer your own questions, and that is how you avoid getting into the other side.
ये तो हाँ, I mean, I feel like that there is a certain amount of a backward step that was taken, or rather a step that was taken in the past, which got us onto this trajectory, and then we continued on this path. But a question for both of you, like, हम लोग ऐसे DM में तो इसके बारे में बहुत विस्तार से बात करते हैं, वत्सल, but I imagine both of you have friends who are, whose politics is, if not completely disagreeable or vitriolic, it's still something that's not based in maybe the same kind of worldview or logic as you. If you come from a place where you happen to have a little bit more information than that person, what's your strategy to communicate it or turn that into a disagreement into maybe some kind of a dialogue?
Can I go first? So I have made a point of my life कि I don't have to teach, or I don't have to tell anybody anything. I don't have to modify their opinions. I don't have to. I have to do it for myself.
Yeah.
Or maybe people who I really care about, and if only they want to. Maybe it's a very selfish way of looking at the world, but it's just not worth it otherwise.
Yeah, no, it's not even about modification, right? It's ultimately, if a conversation has to go two-way,
Well,
if someone
yeah,
says,
sure. If it's a conversation,
what's that way to respond? It's not like you're trying to change their mind. It's just you are coexisting in a space, or you're
then
coexisting in a friendship for many years. कुछ
then
तो
it
back
is
and forth
fine,
होता
right?
है.
Yeah.
Do you,
Then you
that's what I
just
mean. Like not in an adversarial sense at all.
then you just make a conversation. Like, this is my opinion. You are
Yeah.
like very free to think that genocide in Gaza is justified, but I don't think that. Basically, that kind of conversations go like that way.
So your thing is to just simply state your position and
Because I don't want to impose anything on them, right?
Right.
I don't want to change their opinion. I don't want to teach them. I don't want to
it's
basic
a follow up to
concepts.
Sunlovely. How do you do that without losing your mind? I guess.
That is why I told you that,
How do you
right?
keep it?
Because why do you feel the anger, right? Because you want to change their opinion sometimes. Like, you want them to accept कि you are wrong. You should change your opinions, and this is the right way of thinking. That is why sometimes you get angry, right? I guess, at least for me, it used to be that way, right? Otherwise, if they were accepting what you were saying and they were agreeing with you, there would be no friction, so to say. So for that,
Yeah.
that is why I started by saying कि ये मेरा agenda ही नहीं है. तुमको
It's
stupid
fascinating.
रहने का हक है, रहो.
It's almost like in order to deepen that friendship or keep that closeness, you have to distance yourself.
Yeah, to be honest, it comes also from a place of empathy, because I was also someone like that a long time back. Or for some talking points, I might be like that right now. So I'm not judging anybody कि तुमको नहीं आता या तुम्हारा इतना गंदा opinion है, or whatever. Fine, whatever. Keep your opinions and work on yourself. I am not there to do it for you.
Oh, yeah, none of us can be.
But I understand कि you can be a moron, because I have been there too.
MV?
I think यही करना पड़ेगा because I meet like rabid folks on a daily basis across class spectrums.
Right.
Either whitewashed or like tremendously privileged. I think I just try to present facts because just easier. One of the things that I kept hearing very recently with the Calcutta case that happened, the Calcutta rape case that happened, was that कि बीजेपी आ जाएगा तो सब चेंज हो जाएगा. Now nobody in my circle I know, or at least the people I interact with, have ever been to Calcutta, let alone being from Calcutta. So for me, it was very easy. I mean, I told them that, see, was very simply, the CPM had a cadre. That cadre was bought over by the TMC. And now that cadre of TMC is being bought over by the BJP. So nothing is going to change because Calcutta is very, politics is strong. Like within 100 meters of your house, there will be a political office by hook or by crook. So we've seen this happen around us. So please don't give me the spiel कि BJP आ जाएगा तो सब change हो जाएगा. And that for some reason resonated with people. They're like, oh, okay, probably. And I always am this one guy who's not voted for the BJP in large groups. So it's okay. So the other thing is you also get used to the ridicule associated with it. कि अरे ये तो अकेला बंदा जो राहुल गांधी को वोट किया. So like I remember like when the voting had happened for the 2024 elections, we had a very nice candidate from the INC here, the guy who runs the Delhi Public School, Mansoor Ali Khan. So when people obviously groups में पूछते हैं ना कि किसको वोट किया. So the BJP guys always say कि voted for the best candidate. I say, and somebody asked me, like, yeah, Mansoor Ali Khan. So they were like कि अरे तुमको ग्रुप से निकाल दो, इसको ग्रुप से निकाल दो. I said, क्या ही फायदा ग्रुप से निकाल दोगे कि when you can't even own your own political identity and you have to say that this guy was the best candidate when you don't even know that guy is the best candidate. Leave that. There was I remember for the state elections, the candidate from my constituency was the wife of the former MLA, and she was only there because the MLA was embroiled in so many corruption cases.
Right.
So I was like कि ये तो तुम्हारा आइडेंटिटी है कि तुम आंख बंद करके बीजेपी को जाके वोट करके आए हो, तो प्लीज डोंट टीच मी this. I am happy at my high pedestal, and I'm also sometimes with the ridicule. I'm also okay being ridiculed and being, let's say, this lone contrarian, because it's okay to be contrarian. It's just sad, and it's more long term, so it's okay.
You also find yourself drifting away from those spaces towards a space where you are more similar to those around you.
See, first of all, time is very finite. So India में ना, one of the things that's very very clear is that there's just so much time for commute, there's so much time at work, that you have only so much time at home. So I've started, at least for the past couple of years, started valuing time at home a lot more, especially considering, like I said, traveled 150 days a
Right.
year is so that immediately will. So the city changes for me every time I go out and come back. That happens to you. That happens to normal folks when they travel. For me, it changes pretty much every week, every 2 weeks, all the time. So for me, that time at home has become even more critical, at least in the last couple of years, and I've like made a conscious attempt to like reduce my travel. And when that has happened, that has increased time at home. And with increased time at home, there is probably more happiness.
Yeah.
But you have to answer that question for yourself also.
Oh, I am deeply
But
avoidant.
about the conversation.
I basically don't bother making friends with people whose opinions are, too extreme. So in a space like that, the only reason you exist is for their entertainment. So that's the space you're occupying. You are there so that they can ask you frustrating questions and then watch you like try to answer it sincerely, while in their mind it's like, haha, dekho, look at this person who's taking me seriously. Ek point ke baad, what is the purpose of being entertainment for other people? Even when I was in India, it was possible to find those groups and make that possible. And with family, it's yeah, given that everybody, at least here, is so deeply invested in being apolitical and not having politics and only focusing on work and finance and etc. It's been even easier to, even if politics comes up, it's easier to have a relatively neutral position or push them where it's needed. Hani, what you said
But
about
then-
not being invested, yeah, I agree.
But then, how do you deal with somebody who comes out of closet as a Sanghi? If you were like a friend
Yeah.
for, I don't know,
Oh
2
yeah,
decades or
multiple times.
something.
नहीं अभी भी
So-
like it's like the softness. Like पहले I think first wave जब 2014 का time था, उस time पे the people who were coming out of the closet were full closet, like mask off. And so you're like, again, there was no need to break off the friendship because they were as angry with liberals and angry with whatever they perceived as liberals. I was not a liberal at any point in all of this. वो लोग का तो automatically filter out हो गया because they don't want to interact with you, just as you don't want to. And then then the fatigue sets in. The second wave was people like I was working in a space where we were catering to a Muslim community, right? We were people of all religions. We were all working together in that community. And at the time, I had no reason to think otherwise or even ask people anything more about their politics. And 4 years later, I find out that one of the people who was working with me in this community, who was serving this community, and who would occasionally like express frustration because at the things around him, was actually a VHP supporter. Family was VHP, and he was like, thoda, like it took me like I think about 4 or 5 years of probing and probing and probing to uncover the layers. And by that point, he went from like spending many years trying to befriend and build community with people across who had same common values of empathy. I put air quotes here, and tolerance, and air quotes again, and love, to basically moving back into his space where he doesn't want people who judge him and rightfully judge him for having Islamophobic beliefs that he was just masking really well. तो ऐसे तो
ये Islamophobic beliefs are so common.
Yeah.
So I'm a Gujarati, but I have a Muslim name. I remember college first year, I'd asked somebody if they had space in their flat so I could be their roommate, and I got to know only in the third year of college that they had space, and they said no because they thought I was Muslim. This is more common than we imagine. And I'm sure I've been like at the wrong side of this bias across all sides in life. Like, and there is no way of knowing it.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I got a sales deal, if I didn't get a sales deal just because they thought I was a Muslim. So now asserting my identity as a Gujarati from Calcutta is one of the first lines, so that I can like have that fake conversation about India's diversity with them. because the first thing India mein people ask is no, what is your native or where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Calcutta. And then I'm like, but I'm not a Bengali, but I'm a Gujarati. And now, like I said, right earlier, ki, like all of this is like a comedy set for me. So now I've built this ki I'm from Calcutta, but I'm not Bengali, but I'm a Gujarati. And then they're already amazed at this diversity, because for them it's like their village in Bangalore, or Bangalore is their hometown, or whichever city you are in, right? Delhi hoga to Delhi and all of that. And then I'm like, you want to hear further complications? And then I'm like, then they're like, huh. So I'm like, I'm married a Malayali. They're like, wow, this is amazing. It is amazing only for that 2-minute period. So it's amazing only for that. And I think in that experience in college, and then there were other things that I then connected where let's say I've been otherized for having just a Muslim name, is why at least in these commercial conversations I have to ensure कि यार I am not immediately sidelined, boss, because time भी एक चीज है, मतलब कितना टाइम वेस्ट करे.
वही एक पॉइंट के बाद अपने आप को सेफगार्ड करने का भी एक नीड होता है. ये मेरे भाई ने मेरे कजिन ने बोला था, एंड आई अप्लाई द ऑपोजिट टू माई सेल्फ. ही इज ए वेरी सक्सेसफुल पर्सन इन लाइफ, लाइक दैट्स हिज बिग थिंग कि उसने बहुत अपने लाइफ में बहुत कुछ हासिल किया है. एंड अगर आप उससे पूछो तो ही विल क्रेडिट ऑल ऑफ इट. ही विल से वन ऑफ द मेजर थिंग्स दैट got him there was having a good peer group. Of course, when he says peer group, he means merit wala peer group, shall we say, air quotes around merit. So I look at that and I'm like, okay, your objective was to put certain constraints on your life and only make friends in a way based on how successful they wanted to be in life or how much hard work they wanted to put in their life. And it worked for you. It's a formula that worked for you, and tumhare dost bhi are like similarly placed in life. Like you're all earning like a lot of money, and you all have the ability to buy houses for your parents and like do the good things, and you attribute it to like building your merit wala group. तो अगर मुझे जिंदगी में एक ऐसा इंसान बन के रहना है जो क्रिटिकली सोचे, जो bare minimum से ज्यादा करे, and not just someone who doesn't just work in their own field but amasses knowledge across, then I would have to basically spend my time acquiring or being friends with people who are not merit based, I guess, like whose success and goodness comes from multiple sources. That became very important. So anyone who is जिसके बारे में जिससे मिल के 15 मिनट में मैं उनकी पूरी जिंदगी की दास्तान सुना सकूं, that would not be someone that I have much to share with, because in that case I become just an information delivery system, right? And even if you don't, it's not about anger or frustration or wanting to change their mind. If someone who knows certain things and you meet somebody who says मुझे ये सब नहीं आता है, you can either pretend to not know it. You can say हाँ मुझे भी कुछ नहीं आता है, मुझे भी नहीं पता कि देश का प्रधानमंत्री कौन है, पार्लियामेंट में कितने लोग बैठते हैं, environmental whatever, Delhi का pollution index क्या है. Or you can, the moment someone expresses that I don't know this, you find yourself giving them that information, and then after a point, you don't want to be friends with people who are constantly draining you of your energy and like are taking but not giving, right? So हाँ मेरा avoidance ही है. It's been my like building, everything is around it, and then वो डंके की चौक पर जहाँ पे आप ऐसी जगह पे बैठे हो where you know that your opinion is not a opinion that's minoritized in any way. Like, you know more than enough people who hold the same beliefs as you, and they are not all they don't have the exact same lived experience as you. They're from a diverse cross section of society. तब आप बोल सकते हो कि हाँ, I mean, I know plenty of people who think this way. So there is a great deal more, confidence that one can derive from having a circle that is also saying no to the norm.
या कहाँ बातें शुरू की थी, कहाँ चली गई? हमारे पॉडकास्ट कॉन्ग्लोमेरेट के सारे
सब लोग ही आ गए ना, मतलब
एक्सेप्ट आदित्य. There are two Adityas, you know.
Oh, right. I keep forgetting
There's another
there's two.
Aditya from PCCI only, which we missed.
Did you invite him?
No, we didn't.
कट कर
See,
देना.
I cannot do everything. No, मेरे को delegate करना पड़ेगा अपनी mental health के लिए. Like, I've never met the other Aditya. चलो कभी
PCCI का representation
हो
काफी
सकता
था यहाँ पे, तो it's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if he wanted to come here. I hope he doesn't feel excluded.
मैं समझा दूंगा, इधर ही रहता है बगल में.
Sorry बोल देना यार. It's pretty nice to like finally put a face to a name.
तो recording बंद कर दे.
हाँ.
और
क्यों नहीं? Sorry.
চিত্ত যেথা ভয় শূন্য, উচ্চ যেথা শীল, জ্ঞান যেথা মুক্ত, যেথা গৃহের প্রাচীর, আপন প্রাঙ্গণ তলে দিবস সর্বরী, বসুধারে রাখে নাই খণ্ড ক্ষুদ্র করি, যেথা বাক্য হৃদয়ের উৎস মুখ হতে উচ্ছ্বসিয়া ওঠে, যেথা নির্বারিত স্রোতে দেশে দেশে দিশে দিশে কর্মধারা ধায়, অজস্র সহস্রবিধ চরিতার্থতায়, যেথা তুচ্ছ আচারের মরু বালুরাশি, বিচারের স্রোতপথ ফেলে নাই গ্রাসী, পৌরসেরে করেনি শতধা, যেথা নিত্য তুমি সর্ব কর্ম চিন্তা আনন্দের নেতা, নিজ হস্তে নির্দয় আঘাত করিপিত, ভারতের সেই স্বর্গে করজাগরিত. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high and knowledge is free, the words come out from the depth of truth, where clear stream of reason has not lost its way in the dreary desert sand of dead habit. In that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. In that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. When will that time come?